fuck
Yeah, they're made out of fat.
Yeah, like they bounce.
Yeah.
She's like, okay. She's like, you're gonna drop them. Like it's gonna happen. Just get it out of your head now. I'm like, whew. Thank God I haven't yet, but like the time is coming.
Yeah.
There's been several
You
times.
said you're gonna drop them. Like
Yeah.
that's oh,
like
snap.
it's just gonna happen.
It's
They're
great to
gonna swirl out of
close
your
their
hands.
fingers or foot like in a door too. That's perfect.
Exactly.
That works out great. They don't scream for like 8 hours straight,
Yeah.
and you don't feel like the worst person on earth.
Yeah, I still can't hold a baby. I'm afraid I'm gonna break
Terrified.
it. I can't do it.
I will
Oh
only
yeah,
hold
a
mine.
baby.
Yeah, like brand new.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with
It's
it.
terrifying. Nothing scarier on the planet was trying to get her out of the hospital, into the car seat, and home the first time. Just I wanted out of that day so bad.
Car seat.
Yeah.
How about the car seat? That thing's impossible to figure
So
out.
that's what I'm fucking talking about. We did not get that. I wish we would have set that thing up.
Yeah.
We didn't though. So we're out there with a 1.5
And you got into a
day
fight.
old and fucking get into a fight because I'm like,
My wife-
oh my god.
My wife did the same. We did the same exact thing.
Oh, fuck,
and the car
man.
seat is crazy because like it's funny because you don't never understand like minivans. You're like, why would anybody in their right mind ever have a minivan? But you don't understand until you have a kid.
Yeah.
Because when you have a kid, even if you have a big like sedan and you have the child like in the middle seat, I mean that's the only place you can have them when they're an infant
Yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of in the middle there, and they're facing backwards. You can't really even get them out of the seat.
It's fucking
I mean, it doesn't
possible.
matter how strong your back is. You know, I
No.
was squatting over 1,000 pounds at that time, and I felt I was going to throw out my back every time I'd reach over and grab Jake out of the thing. But you have a minivan, and you just slide the door open, and boom, you can get in and out of there real easy.
No, it's a giant pain in the ass. Like, oh, that was the worst too. We didn't
You
know how
guys
to
get a
oh,
minivan it or what?
Fuck no. She
Dude, you
keeps
have to.
I keep saying, no, let's get a Tesla SUV. And she's like, all right, yeah, when are you going to stop being a teacher then? I'm like, fuck. Hard to get Teslas on teacher money. Anyways,
How's all that going? How's the teaching going?
it's fantastic,
Teaching game.
man. I love it. It's what I do. It's my favorite part of my whole life for the most part.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it sounds like you're doing really well, kind of like in your own private sector as well. And it looks like you could kind of jump into that more and probably make a lot more money. But you really love teaching, huh?
yeah, well, it's a combination of things. I definitely love the teaching part of it. There's tremendous security, and I get to live a lifestyle way above my means because I have so many resources
Yeah.
from the university. And I get that extra leg up on the laboratories and all those things that I really want to do that if you tried to finance that privately, my whole life would be about just securing money and keeping money.
Right.
And I don't want to do that. I've come to a realization in the last maybe 5 years, but that part of it really, really rips out my soul. And so I'm just like, well, why?
Right.
And it's a lot of soul searching time. It's a lot of thinking about what do I really want to do. And part of it is, I have to give sort of credit to Chris Moore. I mean, you remember Chris Moore, and when he passed
Yeah,
away,
absolutely.
it was like, fuck, man, like this thing it really hits you when you have somebody really close to you pass away. It's super early for no reason. And it hits you a lot. Like, you better really figure out what you want to spend your time doing because it's just no guarantee. And so one of the realizations that came to me was like, I hate being in the sales and then nothing against that stuff, but I just don't want to do it. And so,
You don't have to be out there like selling yourself.
yeah. And
Like, hey, check out my book and check out this and that. Like, you just don't, that's not your thing.
I don't want to do it. I want to just walk away from that piece. I want to do the things that I love, and teaching I love, and talking I love, and storytelling I love. And I don't like the back end of it. And so I could either get through that and hire somebody or bring somebody on board to work on that piece, which is a viable option. Or I could just be like, I don't really care about that piece.
Right.
Like I tell Natasha, my wife, all the time, I'm like, man, we're young, healthy, and rich. We're not fucking super training rich here. We're not
Right,
slingshotting
right.
rich. But really, compared to how I grew up and compared to a lot of people, we're rich as fuck.
Right.
So like, why am I going through all this stuff? It's a strain on our relationship. It's a strain on the things I want to do. I'm like, we make teacher salaries, but they're real good salaries relative to the rest of the world. So
Right.
I'm just not going to go. I love what I'm doing right now for the most part, man. So
It gives you a lot of options though too, right? But, because you're like literally like in a lab, right? I mean, you
Yep.
can study whatever you want to study, right? You can I mean, just whatever's going on in the world, you can say, "Hey, I think that's bullshit. We're going to start our own study."
100%,
Right.
100%. It lets me really do, and because of the spot I'm in with the center, and because of the university, the way that they don't put pressure on me to do a particular type of research or anything I want, I really can. I mean, I'm a strength conditioning junkie. That's what I do. So I can do the studies on the shit I really am excited about. And I don't have any pressure and any mind. And I don't have to be like, well, no, we got to do this because the brand needs this, or because, hey, well, if we do this and it comes out in the other direction, it screws our whole like, I don't really care where the wind blows in terms of what's effective or not. It doesn't affect my end game at all. And so that's really freeing for me. And from the athlete perspective, since I do like working with athletes so much, but I get to do it on my terms. So I work with very, very, very few select. I have the vast majority that reach out. I say no, I'm not gonna, I can't do it or whatever. Go see Dolce, go see Lockhart, go see, one of my other sports nutrition people that I refer out to, depending on what sport they're in. And the ones I take are either something that is like really, really exciting. Like I got one, actually, I can't announce it, the person per se, but because the fight's not announced yet, but we got a world title fight in a major organization here for July. That's going to be announced soon.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm like, hell yeah. Like I'm really, and this is going to be something, I'm going to spend a tremendous amount of time with this guy. And that's what I want to do. I want to work with one or two people at a time and not just be like, okay, here's the diet, here's the plan, here's the thing. Just to be like, no, man, like I'm spending the bulk of my day on you most days for 6 months, and we're going to try to win a world title. That to me I'm way more interested in that than being able to say like, oh, I had 300 athletes this year, I had 600 people, or I got 400 people. This is not my jam, man. I really like diving in hard to the individual stuff and figuring out really what's going on with somebody and really getting like something really massively accomplished, whether it's a world title or it's somebody hitting a PR in the back. I don't really care. Like that's not the thing. It's just the fact that we can go hard, like really, really hard into something, and someone's going to really dedicate their life and be super passionate about something. And I want to be on board with that. Like I want to support
You
that.
must really love like kind of mentoring people. That's probably what attracts you to teaching, because I'm sure you have, like when I went to your facility, you had a bunch of people kind of assisting you and helping you, and I'm sure those people are looking to you for advice, not just on how to conduct a certain study, but like life advice, like real advice. And then also when you're dealing with these fighters, it's the same thing. Yes, we're trying to make different decisions towards these foods because this is the plan that we're on, but there's just a million other things that go into all that.
To me, coaching and teaching is the same thing. Mentoring, like this is all, it really is the exact same scratch. It's the same thing. And I get fortunate. I mean, I'll say this all the time because one of my former, actually, I claim him as a mentor, but he's actually just my coworker, Lee Brown. So he just got last year NSCA Lifetime Achievement Award, right? So just an unbelievable sports scientist. And he would always say, like, doesn't matter whatever the kids say that I gave to them, like they always gave me more than I'll ever give to them. And I feel the exact same way. So yeah, it's fun to teach them, but really I get way more out of it than I give them because of people like Kara. And you get these people that come through, and I'm like, man, to watch somebody work as hard as they work for the 2 years they're with me, or the time, whatever the time they're with me, and to really dedicate their life to something, and to deal with me emailing them at 4:00 in the morning on Saturday going, hey, I need you to go in and get this right now because I'm up working right now, or whatever it is. And they're just like, yep, okay, I'm on it. And you're like, well, I was going to go. My family's too bad. Like there's just things like sometimes we get done. I mean, I just have a real soft spot in my heart for anybody or any story where someone just really gets after it for a while. And whether that's to get your degree, to build your business, I don't really care what it is, but somebody to me, like, I'm like, man, you went after it. It's not the talent issue, it's the work. And that part of it, like, I'll go to the end with you if you're going to give me that back, and I'll get more out of that than you all will be. I mean, so all that hands, so all those people that come into my lab, it's a tough game, man. Like, I get a lot of people that will hear me on this show and others and be like, oh, I want to come work in your lab. Sounds like you're doing awesome. And I want to meet Mark Bell.
Yeah,
Like,
it's one of those.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how bad you want to be here.
Well, remember Mike Tyson had that famous quote where he said, I'd like to see your average person try to be me for a day. He's like, you would cry.
Yeah.
And he broke down, because he's a pretty emotional guy, but he was like, he's like, I'm up 3:30 in the morning and this is what I do. I fight.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed off and I'm angry and I'm very rarely satisfied. He's like, just try to walk in my shoes for one day. You'll fall apart.
I think Ben Pakulski said it really nice too in Generation Iron. He's like, oh yeah, you think it's all the PEDs? I'll take anything you fucking want and get through my day. You won't.
Right.
Like, you won't. And I was like, yeah, that's a real selling point. Like, you won't, because it's just really, 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 really hard.
Yeah, I think you have a huge leg up on, a lot of people in the fitness space and a lot of people in the space talking about just exercise science, talking about strength and conditioning, because, on this show, we'll say, oh, well, this study showed this or this study showed that, but that might be a study that you actually conducted,
Yeah.
or thoroughly reviewed, and maybe you're one of the few that I can actually kind of interpret some of these things. What are some of your thoughts on what studies can do for us, what science can do for us? Because there's so much talk about it nowadays, where Joe Rogan talked about my brother and I on his show kind of recently and said the Bell brothers don't give a fuck where the study comes from. They want you to actually be doing it, which is partly true.
Yeah.
I hold value in science as well. I think it does hold value for sure. But at the same time, I like to learn from people that have done, and it's hard to get the combination of the two. But it sounds like you're one of the few people who's trying to work towards that with the athletes that you work with and with the people that have come through your program.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because I come from that front side. I'm not a scientist who also likes to work out. I came up I got into fucking science because I like strength and conditioning so much, and I wanted to get more science.
That's how you got so huge.
Yeah, exactly. Right? No, it's because I told Kara actually when we walked in. I said, "Look, because she's a competitive MMA fighter, and she's subject to some random drug testing." Eventually, I said, "You better not wear gloves. Don't touch anything in this fucking building. You never know. Something might be on a table somewhere, and
That's
boom,
right.
gets in your hands."
Put her in a lab coat.
Exactly. I said, "You better fucking take a real chlorine bath. I mean, I don't know. Just get rid of it all. A ton of water. Just get it out of your system."
From what you've seen, how can we use the science?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Back to your actual question. Maybe we should answer that. A couple of things I would say is be very, very, very careful of interpreting science yourself or listening to other people describe it who, if you're in this space, human performance space, who don't work in human research. It doesn't mean they're wrong, and I don't want to mention any names because there's no need. But people that come from, say, they work in biology research or they work in aging research, and then they try to give people advice about what we should do for our health and exercise when they themselves know very little about exercise, either pragmatically in terms of they don't actually exercise or they don't understand the exercise science, literature, exercise physiology. Or the opposite are these pseudo-science people who did a one-click case study and, oh yeah, I did a vodka enema and oh my God, my glutathione went up. That means fucking nothing. That's dick all. That means absolutely nothing. And I love anecdote as much, and I've watched your stuff a lot. I've learned from a lot of people in these things that are not scientists, but they try stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's more merit there because it did work, and now let's go further. So I'm not saying don't listen to anecdote, but just be very careful, right? Because what translates from a mouse, from a cell culture to a human, to an untrained human, to a moderately trained human, to a very well-trained human, those can be leaps and bounds. So when we use the science, we have to consider, okay, great, this is an interesting study, but they used, say, what most of us use as college-age, okay trained people. Okay, good. That's a nugget. That's a piece of insight. Will that actually translate to a professional fighter, an advanced powerlifter? Maybe, maybe not. And now you have to use the next step of your personal experience, your coaching, your acumen, everything else to then make your decision. Because the amount of research we can actually do on professional athletes, it's very, very, very difficult. So my answer to how you use the science is it's always a piece of the conversation, but it's not the entire thing. Just like your anecdote shouldn't be the entire thing either. It's what we call evidence-based practice, right? People hear that term and they think, oh, that means what's the science say? That's not what evidence-based practice means. Evidence-based practice means science is a third of the component, your experience is a third of the component, and what other experts in the field is a third of the component. And you use that to make the most sense. So don't be dogmatic about any of those approaches. I have to do this constantly, even with our own research, because when I'll do, say, a study and
you probably get excited sometimes. You're like, oh, this is cool. And then you're like, oh, this is a new thing.
that very much happens,
Yeah.
right? But because I come at this from my background, I'm always thinking in terms of context. And if you ever heard me on any show, people get super annoyed because I'm always like, fuck, I don't know, it depends. I won't give you a straight answer. But that's because, I know right now, if I took the same concept with Zoila, an MMA fighter, and I tried to use that same exact concept with Morgan King, an Olympic weightlifter, it might not work. Why? Because I've done both. And I know, okay, this would never transfer over here. So when you have that little bit of knowledge, you start expanding that to everything else. You start to realize, oh, okay, yeah, there's huge limitations to this crossover here. And so you need to speak and think appropriately because of the fact that but going back to your point, Mark, the reason I can do that is because I have done these things and I do these things. And so I have a better sense of, unlike most of the people, it's like, no, we showed in the lab clearly this grip was better, so therefore it'll always be better. Well, maybe, because I've seen dudes like Dr. Deadlift here with 12-foot arms. So don't think that's going to matter for him, right? But then I've seen other guys like me with 6-inch arm. Okay, great. Well, if you've never worked with athletes, if you've never coached athletes, if you've never been weight room, if you've never been these things, you're not going to think about those extra layers of, well, fuck, maybe. Right. But I have. And so that's why that stuff jumps into my head. And because the athletes I work with are so sporadic and across different sports and body types, age, genders, I'm thinking about that all the time because in my head, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 of my athletes and going, yep, okay, maybe her, maybe him. No, not him at all. And so that's just why I tend to answer the way I answer is because I'm always thinking those situations in my head. So it's super annoying. I get it. No. Sorry. You've passed your opportunity to ask questions. We're back to you, Mark.
I'm curious, since you get to work with like a lot of fighters, and probably a lot of grapplers in general, is there a trend that you've noticed in terms of what works for them nutritionally, in terms of like, do certain athletes tend to work better with much higher fat and moderate carbs, or in general, do all of these athletes just work better with higher carb because of what they're doing in that sphere?
In general, I feel like I want to just take my shirt off right now and cuddle up to you. That voice is so smooth.
I'm sorry.
I know.
I'll make it a little bit higher.
I know. I've asked the people listening, to put their hands on the table, keep their hands up where we can see them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Visuals. Yeah. Sorry, my left hand's going to be gone for a minute here. I can do both. Either way is fine. Right or left.
Just
Enough practice.
just nothing premature.
Well,
Yeah.
he does have
Natasha
he does
tell
have
you
a kid now, so
Mhm.
premature maybe.
Oh, you have to actually have some mature to be premature. Have a 9-month-old and see how often that happens.
Oh boy.
So I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. Oh, she knows I'm kidding. She's a savage that way. Anyways, what was? Oh yeah. There are general trends, but I don't think they would be that exciting or enticing or novel. They would be what you would predict them to be. Whether some do better on high fat stuff. In the sports I work with, I have yet to come across anyone who does better on a very high fat, low carbohydrate diet. That doesn't mean that there aren't any there. I think you've, Matt Brown.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So he'll go into a ketogenic diet often in between, but even when he gets into camp, he has to back off of that. It just doesn't work well. And so, we've done for a couple of years now, and it's like, okay, it just doesn't seem to work very well when he gets into camp. So again, that doesn't say you couldn't. I just haven't come across any that do better that way. So,
There's a lot of reasons for it, but one of the main things is just digestion and just like logistics. So if you train 3 times a day,
Yep.
and you were to eat steak in between your training sessions,
really tough.
even a small amount of meat in between training sessions would, first of all, not be appetizing.
Yeah.
It would be kind of gross, and then secondly, like, these guys are going pretty hard, and they're doing some really intense workouts. So it's like, the odds of that stuff really sitting in there well, it's probably not great. And then getting from one workout to the next, sort of using the carbohydrates and the lower fat model to kind of recover from each workout is probably the best option for most, right?
Yeah, and again, when we have to differentiate, you asked a really good question. We have to differentiate these professional athletes, which are really pretty novel, from somebody like any of us who trains probably mostly every day, maybe a couple of times a day, but very rarely are we going to do more than, say, 10 training sessions in a week. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you're at double. I don't know.
Just kind of. Yeah.
Okay. Most people then, even in our field, are really talking 4 to 6 to 7 workouts in a week would be pretty high end still. Like Zoila, again, example. I'm just thinking of her because she's right on the street here. It's insane. Like if I can summarize 90% of our conversations, it's please stop training so much. Like that's where we're at, because she's constantly, almost every day, does some sort of cardio in the morning, and then has some sort of either striking or kickboxing class, and then has sparring or something like that. So she is almost always training 3 times a day. Across the week, then, you're looking at something like, depending on how much she will listen to me or not, 15 to 18 workouts in a week. And I'm not talking, like I went for a 30-minute power or a 10-minute walk as my workout. This is not counting her coaching and her personal, her privates, and all this other stuff. So
None of these are throwaway workouts. They're all
No.
pretty damn hard.
And she's kickboxing and grappling and wrestling and doing, her cardio sessions or 45 minutes on the treadmill sort of things. And so to be able to get recovered for that in time, it's just so much easier with carbohydrate. She handles it well. Digestion's no problem. Getting her on weight is, it is what it is. That's part of the sport, but it would be really, really, really difficult for just us to can carbs as much as she wants to, and she's constantly pressing that.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, well, we need these things in here. So you just don't have the, as you mentioned, the point is you don't have the logistical time. You don't have the, well, okay, I got to do my fasted cardio at 9 o'clock in the morning, which I don't advise, but she does. This is part of working with an athlete, right? Not that I don't advise it, but it's not my go-to.
So sometimes though, when you run into something like this, and this is this like fits into the fighters like
Yep.
their mental, like what they believe in, right?
Yep.
It fits into their beliefs. You can't really take that away, huh?
Man, you got to be, and this is also kind of what we were
You're
talking
like,
earlier.
that's dumb. You shouldn't be doing that, but you can't really do that to them, right?
Well, yes and no. You're mostly right in terms of no. This is the reason why I wouldn't really teach a seminar in these things or do like a book or anything like that, because you have to manage going back to science. Okay, science tells us X. Okay, your individual athlete then tells you another huge percentage. You know, how do they respond? But then past that, you have to start getting into the soft skills, and you have to start thinking about what have they done before? What's the culture in their gym? What's their head coach want them to do? What are they scared of? What does their teammate do? What are they nervous about for this particular contest going on? And so you have to think about all of those things. So if you look at the advice I have given any of my athletes, every single piece of it would sound unbelievably contradictory. And I'll straight up lie to them sometimes. I'll for sure straight up lie. Saying something like that, like right now, if Zoila texted me and said, hey, do you think I should do fasted cardio right now? I'd be like, absolutely. We definitely need to do this tomorrow. Because I know that she really wants to do it anyways. And I could fight her on that. And sometimes I'll put my foot down and be like, hey, but I'll always do it this way. I don't want you doing this because of this reason. And if that is a secondary good reason, then she'll totally buy in. It's no problem. It's not like she's not bought in, but it's just really, really hard when that number's on the scale in your head and the weeks are cutting closer and you're just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And you just sort of get panicked. And so you absolutely don't, there's certain things I won't touch, even if I know that they're wrong. But there's certain things where I'm like, okay, if you want to do that, fine, but then we have to do this. Can we get here? Fine, great. And Marie Spano, who's fantastic, a dietitian for the Atlanta Hawks, Braves, and the other team down there. I heard her say this at a conference one time about a ketogenic diet. This was maybe 4 years ago, and I've totally stolen this. But she said, look, when an athlete brings you on board as part of their team, sometimes they're going to ask you about what you think you should do. And then you could tell them. But most of the time, they're paying you to help them get where they want to get. You're on the same fucking team.
Right.
Like, let's not forget, you're on the same team. So if they come to you and say, hey, Andy, what do you think I should do? A ketogenic diet is probably not going to come out of my mouth very often at the gates, right? But if they come to me and say, hey, I want to compete here. I like doing keto. Can you help me do keto better? Then why would I waste time going, no, you shouldn't do keto? That's the opposite fucking team. It's not helping. It's going out. It's only going to drive things, and they're probably going to walk out the door, not listen to what I said, and or work with somebody else, which is fine. But my point is, like, we need to take what they're already doing and figure out what are the negotiables, non-negotiables, and then work within those parameters. That's how you actually get athletes that are really, really happy and want to come back, because it's like, no, I'm going to help you do better here. And in this case, a lot of the times, there are few things that can't be adjusted. If you understand things at the high enough level, I can say, okay, you really want to do this, this, and this? Okay, fine. Let me work this around to that. Okay, fine. And now we're set here. But when you go just in one thing, you gotta let me know, because this whole system's kind of predicated on balance here. And if you throw one off, you're not there. So that's how you deal with it. But that stuff only comes with enough experience coaching and being in the gym and being there and understanding what it feels like and things like that. So
Every coach needs to be a good liar, and you need to be able to
straight up.
Like if I helped Nsima with something in the gym, and somebody else comes to me and says, hey, I was thinking about doing this for my deadlift, I'd say, no, I gave Nsima this tip the other day. It worked really well for him. And they would go, shit, he deadlifted 755. So maybe I should, even if I didn't tell him to do it, or just whatever way you can get the person to do it, right?
Dude,
you do that sometimes, you pit them against each other.
Do you have any idea how many times I've had an athlete ask me questions, particularly like, are we okay here? And I've gone, yeah, no, we're fine. And then turn around to their head coach and be like, oh, fuck. Or in myself, or called this, I mean, like, oh boy, this is going to be a tight one. Yeah, especially like, can we do this and make weight? Yeah, no, we're totally good. Is this where it was last camp? Yeah, you're dead on spot.
26 pounds, no problem.
Shit.
We got it.
Yeah. We're way higher than we were last time. Can I get there? Yeah, I mean, if I don't think they can get there, I'm not going to lie.
Right.
Like, I'll stop it immediately. I haven't had to do that yet, but I would. But, one time, but wasn't. Anyways. But yeah, like, you have to be careful within that last stretch of not breaking them upstairs. Like,
right.
You have to appreciate the psyche and just be like, it's more important right now that I worry about this, and you just think that we're in a good spot.
Right.
And I fucking hope we get there. So
Yeah, it's got to be hard because with fighting, there's multiple coaches, right? There's a kickboxing coach and there's a jiu-jitsu guy, and they got a lot of different people pulling them in different directions, and then there's kind of the old school mentality, which I think has slowly changed over time. It's still sitting there, I guess. Kind of the wrestler mentality, which is just like, we'll just kill ourselves to get to wherever we need to get to, right?
It's still prevalent a lot in the kickboxing community. It's still prevalent. I got one, Nathan Tomasello, sensational wrestler, Ohio State guy, like really, really good chance to go to Tokyo. And he works tremendously hard, but he's good. The people around him are really, really solid, and they're really respectful. So whatever we say, basically, he'll roll with. And it's really, really good. Others in that same sport, I'm like, all right, just let me know what the damage was, and I'll see what I can do in the back end, because I know you're not going to listen to me. So here we go. Like, again, I'm on your team here. This is what you're going to do. I'm not going to fight you with it. It's better. I'd rather you be honest with me. Tell me that you're not going to listen to me from the training point, but you want my help in the recovery. Okay, fine. But eventually they'll figure out, like, man, we're having to pull all these recovery tricks off. Maybe we should just think about the training. But sometimes that takes time.
So, specifically to fighting, it sounds like you got most of these athletes, utilizing carbohydrates, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also hear, though, kind of in the general population where everybody kind of always wants to say, well, everybody's different. How different? How different are we really? Like, some people will say, I don't respond well to carbs, but typically when I hear people talk about carbs, when they talk about them in a negative context, they're talking about pizza and ice cream.
Yeah.
And when I hear bodybuilders talk about carbs, they're usually talking about like rice and potatoes. So we got people talking about kind of different things, but...
Well, you're on fire this morning. You're on fire with good questions. So, okay, a bunch of ways I want to go after this. Number one, for an athlete who's training 18 times a week versus somebody who's training 5 times a week versus somebody training no times a week, these are very different recommendations. For example, this is actually why I loved your...
So maybe, just for a second, maybe it's not so much in the difference of each person, but in the difference of activity. Obviously, there'll be a lot of differences between like you and me and him, right? But it's probably almost maybe even more important of what we do, right?
I would say both of those are very, very important. We do have to respect there's some major inter and intraperson differences. But like your war on carb thing. Okay, initially when you started doing that, people were just like, oh my God, another keto zealot, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just fucking listen to what he's saying, actually. It's not what he's saying. First of all, that's just a whole novel idea, right? Like, actually listen to what they're saying. But, for example, I gave that to my dad, right? Because no physical activity, basically, and he needs extremely simple guidelines and instructions. So translated to him was, don't eat carbohydrates. Copy. Because you know what he thinks carbohydrates are? Exactly what you just said. He doesn't understand that a vegetable is a carbohydrate, right? Fruit is not a carbohydrate to him. So translated to my dad, carbohydrates were all the food I shouldn't be eating. And so it's an extremely simple message. It is one rule, basically. It's very easy to follow. There's no confusion here, right? Simple. This turns out to be pretty effective for those folks.
You can tell somebody in an elevator, hey, don't eat carbs, catch you later.
Right? Which is what they want. Like, they don't want to be bogged down in like you're saying about your book. You're like, okay, I got to do this, and I got to go to page 14, then I got to manage. Most people they're not in this space, aren't going to do that. Moving over to the moderately active person and the extremely highly active person, then I think we can start having conversations of, okay, let's talk about when carbs are good, when carbs are bad. And let's talk about what carbs really are. Differentiating sugar, that word, we won't actually get into the chemistry of it here, but anytime someone's making a lot of ruckus about what carbs do or sugars do, I always want to ask, like, what is sugar? Like, do you actually know what that is? Here you are selling your anti-sugar diet or pill or company behind it. Like, could you explain to me what literally sugar is? Vast majority can't. Right? They really, really, really can't. Do you understand the difference between sugar and starch? Could you literally tell me what they are? Not give me food examples, because that's the easy one. Oh yeah, potatoes are starch. Okay, what is that? Why is it a starch? Right? Dead. And then you're a fucking nutrition expert and you don't know what that is. No, you're out. Like, go on. You don't get to be part of the conversation. Like, you don't know what fructose does. Oh yeah, it's sugar. It's bad. Nope. Oh, it's in fruit. Okay, great. Do you know why it's different than glucose? No. Do you know how it's processed differently? Oh, you think that causes fatty acid liver disease? You don't know fuck all. Like, you need to stop talking. You're out of the conversation.
Yeah, I always say you go like 3 questions deep on somebody and they're completely lost. And a lot of times it's even more than that. I mean, it's even less than that.
2.
Rather.
Usually,
Yeah.
what is sugar? Done. Like, we're out here. Conversation over.
Right.
I think just to give my opinion on those pieces, I don't know anyone. I mean, fucking bring Lane Norton back. Why did I get to debate Lane, by the way? What the hell? Bring him up here. Lane, I'm challenging you right now to a debate. I don't know
There you go.
what, because we probably agree on almost everything, but fuck you. I want a debate.
How about politics? That'll be popular.
Oh, yeah.
Gun control.
Yeah.
We'll get people excited around
I'll
here.
bring in my freezer full of...
Yeah, religion. Talk about
Animal.
religion and politics.
There we go. I don't know, Lane. Whatever. You're an asshole, Lane. Yeah, so most of us that are reasonable are going to say, hey, let's minimize the amount of added unnecessary sugar to our diet. Like, I just don't know. Even somebody like a Zoila or a Scott Holtzman, whatever, that are training these ridiculous times, we don't need to add a lot of sugar to their diet. We can still get that from real food most of the time, with the exception of some very unique circumstances. We might add some honey or things like that, right? So that, to me, is like, why do we even have that conversation? Everyone's in agreement. This is generally not a good thing. For normal health, like, it's a no-brainer. We don't need to be adding a lot of sugar. Can you? Fine. In some cases, if total calories are controlled for and you want to remove something else. Cool, got it. So that, to me, is out of the conversation. Moving to the middle piece, though, that's a little more dicey, is, okay, what about carbohydrate foods that are real foods? Fruit, things like that. And now do you get into your, well, some people handle them well, some people don't. The vast majority, it's a two-way thing. So one of the reasons why you maybe don't handle those foods well is because you don't eat them often. Like, this is the problem with the elimination thing. So, like, well, take it out of your diet for 30 days and then put it back in and see what happens. I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to feel like shit.
And you're going to shit your pants.
Yeah, like, this is not an effective use of elimination diet,
Right.
because when you take something out of your diet, you effectively downregulate the ways that you metabolize and break down that food. So then when you reintroduce something that hasn't been in your gut for 30 days or 60 days, it's going to feel like shit. You're not lactose intolerant now. Like, you just haven't had to metabolize that in a long time. So we have to be careful there. I mean, obviously, for the most people, metabolic flexibility is the way to go, that term has been hijacked recently, I don't know, into thinking maximizing fat is metabolic flexibility. That is not, I'm sorry, I won't name you, but that's not what that term means. The term means is you should be able to have a bolus of carbohydrate, or even sugar for that matter, and not feel horrible for an hour. Like, you might not feel perfect, but you should, if you feel terrible, then you're not very good at using carbohydrate. Like, we would call you very precious. Let's say, like, you're very precious.
Yeah, you're fragile.
You're fragile as fuck.
Everything gives you a fucking allergy.
Yeah,
Everything,
like,
you know.
we that's not a good place to be in. It's not like, for some reason we want to be like that. It's like a badge of honor. Like, oh my god, no, if boy, I can have berries, but man, if I have any melon, just by the way, like watermelon, like, not actually super full of sugar, like dipshits think. It's mostly water.
Yeah, it's water. Yeah.
Yeah, like very satiating, very filling, and very little calories actually. So, like, if you're about a watermelon, I crashed. You've got metabolic problems.
Right.
You should fix that shit. Same thing. Like, if you can't, wake up here and decide, hey, fuck it, let's go train really hard. I'm not going to eat. Let's go fasted. And you get 20 minutes into it and you're a crybaby. Well, you're not flexible in the other direction. You need to be able to power yourself. If you can't wake up and go 16 hours without food and still maintain cognitive function, I mean, you might be hungry. The pangs might be there, but you should be able to function just like physiologically. You're fine. If you can't do that, like, you're a precious little bitch. We need to fix that metabolically, unless you're optimizing to one of the spectrum for a sport or some particular contest or competition, right? But for the most part, we need to be able to do that. And my athletes are the same. They need to be able to use, if they become extremely carbohydrate dependent, that could be a problem.
The other way that somebody might not, the other type of person that may not utilize carbohydrates very well, or say that they might not use carbohydrates very well, might be someone who's heavy.
Yeah,
Right.
That can happen.
Like, maybe they got some insulin resistance along the way, or
Well,
something like that?
definitely if that happens.
Okay.
Yeah, if they are or moving towards insulin.
Because I mean, people
resistance,
say
that's
like,
a real
"Oh,
problem.
the carbs make me fat," and again,
Hey, you want to know something
they're
interesting?
choosing
on that?
they're choosing some bad carbohydrates that they're talking about.
Well,
but-
it's the calories that made you fat,
right.
right? And you just happen to like to overeat most of your calories in the form of carbohydrate,
Right.
which I actually agree with you, and a lot of other low carb proponents.
It's because I'm a fucking genius.
Absolutely. Could you stop talking so much, by the way? Jesus, I can't get anything out.
Well,
just waiting.
he's upset because you got so excited, and he doesn't know what to say now.
No, there's something I
Well,
want to
let me
ask
finish my
you.
point, anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
And okay, good.
No, I'm sorry. Um,
He could kill both of us.
I know he can. Look at him.
I think he's planning on it.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I can see
I'm
when those
not.
eyes are boiling. I get it. I can smell. I actually agree that most people in the general population, um, a disproportionate percentage of the extra food they eat comes in the form of carbohydrate. So I actually agree there with saying like, hey, if we get most people to think maybe we should eat so many carbohydrates, especially when we're extremely inactive, that's not the worst message in the world. People typically aren't overeating on fat as much as they are carbohydrate as a general rule. So I actually would agree on that. And I can't remember where I was actually going with the major point. So I'll just let you ask your question now. So
It's cool.
sorry.
No, that's cool. It's cool. So, you know, like the IFYM crowd and the bodybuilders obviously don't have as much expenditure as, you know, your MMA athlete and those type of athletes that do a lot of cardio.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, do you?
No, I won't forget this time. Yeah.
Okay. But something you'll see a lot in the crowd that tracks macros is, let's just say, a badge of honor in terms of eating a lot of carbohydrates while staying fairly lean. So in upwards of like 400, 500, 600. And this could be a 160, 70-pound male that eats that many carbs and maintains their weight, and they have a decent level of activity. I see that as being somewhat detrimental. Like, you don't need that many, but a lot of them do it because like, oh, well, when I start prepping, then I can have a lot of food to work with, etc. But I mean, what would be the detriment, especially like long-term health, like detriment to that?
So I don't know if there is a huge long-term health detriment to that, but I would agree with you fully on the fact that it's probably not necessary. It's easier for most people to think about protein as being a supply chain. It is the raw material you need for, of course, muscle, but immune system function, neurotransmitters, hormones, those are all proteins. So we need amino acids with those. Carbohydrate and fat are a lot more flexible. So if you want to go on 40% carbohydrate and 20% fat, or the inverse, that's not going to make a whole hell of a difference. Or you want to switch those ratios around. I don't think it matters. So do you need to be 600 to 700 grams of carbohydrate to body mass? So of 160, so now you're really, 4 to 5, 6 grams per kilogram body weight of carbohydrate. That's not outrageous, but that's perhaps a bit higher in the spectrum than I typically
Especially
would
for
do.
like the type of work they're doing, right?
But what's interesting about that, and this is I actually was going to talk about when you brought up insulin sensitivity. So we have two different types of muscle fibers, fast twitch and slow twitch. Well, the slow twitch are typically not as powerful, but they have better endurance, which means they're better at using fat as a fuel. Fast twitch fibers, the inverse, more powerful, faster, and they're much better at using carbohydrate as a fuel. One thing that is incredibly clear is people that have a large percentage of fast twitch muscle fibers are at extreme risk of diabetes. And this is because if you lose regulation of those fast twitch muscle fibers, you lose the primary place that's controlling blood glucose. So it's a huge problem with particular communities, particular ethnic backgrounds that have a propensity to have more fast twitch fibers. They also happen to be at a huge risk of that. Having said that, then that is also the answer. Specifically, this is why strength training, in my opinion, is even more effective for prevention and treatment of diabetes, type 2, than endurance steady state exercise, because of the fact that that's the only way to efficiently target your fast twitch muscle fibers. Get those things to start burning glucose. They'll start taking in the blood glucose. Your actual blood glucose will be very well managed. So it's an incredibly important part for most people, again, who are not into this field. You dabble yourself with a moderate dose of carbohydrate under control, not excessive, not 600 grams, not 70% like some people. I mean, look at the national data. Some people, it's not uncommon to see people on 70% carbohydrate diets that are not physically active. Yeah. You manage that with no contractile stimulus of your fast twitch fibers, because the only way to turn those on is high force activities. Your normal day-to-day living, even a steady state cardio, is almost effectively basically fully slow twitch fibers. So you have this combination of you're not using, because you're not asking the muscle to ever produce any force, with overload of carbohydrate, and then wabam, major problems. So you want to prevent that. You want to stop that. If we dose normal people with controlled carbohydrate and some strength training, boy, I really think independent of obesity, because that's another, but independent of that, type 2 diabetes risk, I think, is really manageable. So
yeah, for a long time, I used to kind of think like people could kind of do any exercise they want. They could like
Well, that's
walk or like
true,
ride a
true, yeah.
bike or whatever. But I've changed my opinion on it. I think everyone needs to lift.
Yeah.
I really do. I really think that, I guess there's some people, like if you're really active in certain sports and maybe you don't like quote unquote need to lift.
Right.
But I think that a lot of us could really, most of the population can benefit very strongly from some weight training.
Yep.
Just
I would
moving around
agree.
some damn weights.
Well, for that reason alone, you want to start talking about aging too. The data are just incredibly clear. When you lose muscle mass with age, it's coming almost entirely from fast-twitch muscle fibers. And so again, this is the reason why, gardening, walking, taking the stairs is helpful for burning more energy. And that's helpful for maintaining body mass. And that's critically important for aging and health. But really, you lose the quality and the amount and the size of those fast-twitch muscle fibers. I mean, you go from rhinoceros to like squirrel muscle fiber size. You're going to have a problem. Maybe not now, but you're going to have a huge problem with aging. In fact, I mean, you go over the things that predict successful aging and wellness. This is it. And not to jump ahead of myself here, because I'm going to go into this in depth with Rogan, but we have to be very careful of then prescribing things that are like, hey, super low protein diets because we want to downregulate mTOR. Really, dummy? Yeah, that rat might live 30% longer, and your motherfucking ass is going to be in a wheelchair when you're 50. You're going to have no muscle when you're 60. You ain't going to be living by yourself at all. It's a real stupid idea. I'm not saying you have to be on high protein your whole life, but you really want to start taking medications pharmacologically and prophylactically.
Yeah.
And you want to start going on, 20-gram protein diets per day. Yeah, we'll see who looks better when they're 75. Let's see who's running across the street.
Well, when I was
Insane. Insane.
when I was on Rogan with my brother, I kind of mentioned to Joe, I was like, I don't think you're going to live to be like 125 years old because you're be like on a special diet.
Yeah.
And he's like, I disagree. And then we kind of like went past it because we got Rogan. He sometimes just goes off on his own thing. But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we know enough to like. Obviously, there's so many other factors. There's just too many things to even. But we're not really seeing that. Obviously, you can. I think what's happening is people are not really living longer. They're like dying longer. They're alive for a long time, but they're in a lot of fucking pain. And so I think we can starve that off.
Yeah.
And I think you can get to 80 or 90 before you need like pills and a bunch of different things. I think that's kind of almost all we can hope for. I don't know if we're gonna just all of a sudden be like, hey, look at there's Joe Rogan, 145 years old. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm sorry, Peter DeMattis, but I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that will help were things like early detection of cancer and
Yeah,
stuff, and that's
that
going
could
to
be
shake
huge.
people off, all that stuff. But in terms of barring any accident, barring any death, what I'll call early unnecessary death, cardiovascular disease, things like these, the top end. I mean, I don't know, more than 5, 10, sort of 15 years. I think aging well is the more appropriate play right now.
Yeah.
So none of us are interested, especially from our backgrounds.
I also think too. I don't think people have thought this through very well. If you live to be
Well, you
100,
can just stop right there.
yeah. Period. End of podcast.
Full stop.
Well, if you live to 150, that
Yeah.
means every single person that you've ever met is dead.
Yeah.
You got to make a lot of new friends. So,
Twice.
Yeah, many times over. You probably saw your grandkids die and everything.
Your great grandkids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not particularly interesting. I
Doesn't
don't.
sound fun.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we all want to age better, and we want to continue. We're in a spot actually, which is really nice technology wise. Like our parents' generation. I mean, your dad and mom are probably getting close to retired. Are they
Yeah,
retired?
they're in their 70s. Yeah.
Are your parents retired?
Sisters, my mom's 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're getting close to that age, right? Our parents' generation were just like, you get to 67 and you retire, right? Because you don't want to do that shitty job anymore. You don't want to go in the office and
Mhm.
you don't want to work on people's taxes anymore.
Right.
Whatever the shit you're doing, right? But now, with the space we're moving into, I don't think you're going to see as much retirement anymore.
Yeah.
There's no need to do it. And because I think that will have a massive impact on our well-being and health, right? Because one of the quick things that we
You
say
need
is
an obligation of some sort.
you need purpose. You need exactly all those things. I think that's going to help us. That'll be a thing that'll move us in the direction upstairs. Now, as long as we can survive the technology thing, which may put us in the worst direction, we have a shot.
You're very persuasive. When I went to your facility, you and I think everybody else was in on it too. You guys made it seem like it was no big deal to do a muscle biopsy.
It's not.
But I've never had it done before, and
You're
I'm
so
probably just
sensitive.
a big pussy. But
No, probably.
man, That shit hurt.
Did it really?
It did, yeah. For weeks.
Really?
Yeah, fucking hurt.
And
How fat
everyone
was that needle?
Yeah, everyone in that lab was so excited once they pulled Mark's muscle fibers
It didn't
out.
hurt when it happened at all.
Ah.
It didn't hurt at all when it happened. It started hurting like a couple days later.
That's interesting.
Probably the infection.
Yeah, well,
the alien babies they put inside your leg.
Yeah,
what we didn't tell you is you're in an experimental government trial.
yeah. Well, I didn't know that
You're so lucky.
You lured me in to check my penis size. You could have just measured it. You could have just asked.
Well, we actually had to do that rectally as well, so that was part of why we did that other thing too.
That's why I was out cold.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's why you woke up pregnant 4 months later.
yeah.
What happened?
That was weird.
Yeah.
No, I've had 35 or more on my own self.
Yeah, that's what you guys were saying, and now I understand why, because you can't find anybody else to do it. No one else is dumb enough
Well,
besides me and my brother.
Kara's study has you got to get 4 in one day.
Damn.
You got to get 2 of them. Then you have to cycle on a metabolic cart. So no faking it here. I'm collecting all the things you're breathing in and out, measuring heart, all that stuff.
Shit.
You got to do a minute and a half at 90+% of your VO2 max. 2.5 minute recovery. You got to do 6 rounds of that, and then you got to do 2 more biopsies afterwards.
Damn.
And none of those girls have complained afterwards about their muscles
They're a
being
lot
sore.
stronger than me. So it matters.
I've biopsied hundreds of people at this point, and I would say only
Just me.
a
I'm the
couple
only
of
one who
people have
cried.
complained about.
I'm a big bitch.
I mean,
What can I-
I'm really curious how this looks
What can
because,
I
like,
say?
I was told the size of the needle is like a little bit bigger than a straw, right?
it's probably more like a barbell width.
Wait, seriously?
No, no, it probably looks like a pen, like the pen you have
That's
is.
disgusting. I hate. Yes.
Yeah,
I'd be a bitch too. I wouldn't
Yeah,
want
but
to do that.
the sounds that it made when they pulled it out, it was like an actual
Yeah.
suction cup, like thunk. It was like, whoa.
Yo, what does it do? It
guys
like
are
it
dramatic.
literally
Not being dramatic.
So dramatic.
it
Not at
literally
all.
like cuts some muscle out, right?
yeah. So basically, there's a bevel in the needle, and the needle goes into your thigh, and we have a suction attached to the end of it, so it sucks whatever muscle can go into the bevel, and then we chop down and cut that off and remove it. And so we end up getting, call it 100 milligrams of muscle tissue, which is like the size of a pea. So the needle looks big and scary and all that, but we're really taking the size of a pea out
Yeah.
of your muscle.
But if it takes 2 people to pull it out, I think that's
Yeah, but this is mechanics. I mean, it doesn't take 2 people to pull it out. It takes one hand. It takes 1 pound of pressure. We have assistants holding the cords and stuff like that, so
Yeah.
they don't trip me, you dick.
what was great is so after they pulled out Chris Bell's, they're like, oh, this is whatever, this is awesome. And then they pulled Mark's out, and they start, everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at this one. They go crazy. And then I just look over at Chris, and he's just like, they didn't react like that when they pulled mine out.
Yeah, these guys act like they scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. It was so
That's not
good.
true, Chris. What happened was simply we got sometimes when you get the
You get a
muscle
better
out,
sample.
yeah, we got a better sample with yours, and yours happened to be particularly nice.
Yeah, he was like, I guess mine wasn't that impressive.
His
Like,
was-
it's all right, buddy.
No, and to make you feel better, Chris, we have analyzed your fibers as well. I just didn't put them on the poster because it was kind of hard to explain the 2 different. And I was like, whatever. So we put his, but we have yours too, Chris, and it looked equally impressive. So don't
There
worry.
you go.
There you go.
You're not lying. Equally impressive.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
snap.
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, we haven't gone through all of his fibers yet, so I don't know if he has any that lined up quite rhino style. But he was, I can't remember his exact fiber type profile relative to yours, but both of them were very clearly highly trained
You get a
strength folks.
a pretty accurate analysis just from one
Yeah.
thing from someone's leg, or
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. There's always small discrepancies,
would
but
the upper body be similar, or
no.
okay?
So actually, a couple things on that. The fiber type can actually be different within the exact same muscle in different areas, but we know that, and so I go with this exact same area on every person to make sure. And depth, closer to the bone, further away to the other side, and all that stuff matters. Up and down. So in your case, closer to the hip or closer to the knee. But this is what I do for a living, so I got that part pretty figured out. No, your muscle fiber, the muscle composition of your muscles, or the fiber type composition of your muscles differs depending on each muscle group, and it differs between person. It's highly subjective to change based on how you train. In fact, there's significant evidence to show everything from cold water immersion, hypoxia, vitamin D, resveratrol, polyphenols, obesity, aging, inactivity. All of these things can change your muscle fibers, the composition of them. Now, the non-exercise stuff is not well documented in humans, but all the exercise stuff is extremely well documented in humans. So with the different muscles, we call it structure follows function. So if you look at like your spinal erectors, not that kind of erection, Mark, the spinal erectors, stay on point. I don't know what the actual composition of your that kind of erector is. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure yours is more of the fast twitch, explosive,
You never know.
not a lot of endurance. Hey, I don't know. Sorry.
Hey now.
Like your spinal erectors, or I'll go to your shank. This is easier. So in your calf, you've got two primary muscles. You have the soleus and the gastroc, right? The soleus starts in the back of your lower leg and goes into your Achilles. And that's what we call an anti-gravity or postural muscle. So it's what's keeping us all standing right now. Right next to it is the gastroc, and that it goes into the foot, the exact same spot through the Achilles, but actually originates behind the knee. And that's the one, if you flexed your thing, it would pop out to the side, right? It's that vertical thing. That's extremely fast twitch. The soleus is extremely slow twitch. So when I'm walking, my shank then has the ability to produce force such as the force is needed. So as I walk, or if I'm standing, the gastroc is basically completely turned off. It's useless, right? It doesn't need to be going there. But you want to propel, jump, sprint. When the gastroc kicks in, it can't do it a lot of times because it gets fatigued, but it can propel you to explode. Hamstring, glutes, quads, biceps, triceps, shoulders, diaphragm, heart, all these things have actually a fairly predictable, once you think about what they do, QL, extremely slow, right? Anti-gravity muscle. But traps, very different, right? That's different function. So it's pretty specific to what we need them to do.
You were saying, like 80% of my muscle fibers were type 2, is that right?
2A, yeah, which is a very, very high number. In fact, when we did our weightlifting study, so that just came out about a week ago. So that was very, very interesting with our Olympians and world champions, and we took their biopsies. They had, as a group, the world team members, the Olympic members, were all happened to be girls, but all of those girls, as a group, were over 70% fast twitch, which is extremely rare, and in fact, is the fastest ever documented. Yours was 80%. Some of the girls in that study, though, were higher than 85%.
Oh,
so your 80% was extremely rare, and some of those girls were 85% plus. Just exceptional values. What was actually very interesting is we compared them to like what we call national caliber girls and guys. So these are people that are qualifying for national championships in weightlifting, which is still really, really, really hard to do. At this point, the numbers are really, really high, but they weren't quite world team members, right? So they weren't traveling to international meets, they weren't in the Olympics. And they were noticeably lower. I think more like 66, 65% fast twitch, which are still exceptionally high numbers for most people, but there was a big difference between the world team girls and the national level girls and guys. So it was very, very interesting.
What have you seen, learning that information? How would you utilize that information, even if you can use it? Like, how would you utilize it?
There's a couple of things. Number one, we're simply, first of all, trying to figure out what we're looking at, right? So I can't rebuild your engine until I open up the hood. That's the biggest piece. We're going to do a whole bunch of follow-up analyses on this tissue, looking at some of the stuff like we did with you, with the mononuclear domain and all these other things. Where we can get to is a couple of things. Number one, we've actually done this with 3 of the athletes from that study, where we, based on what we found, we have changed sort of like the velocities that we want them to train at. And all 3 of them have significantly improved since then. And that's not my words, this is their coach. So their head strength coach was like, I can't say who because I got to keep the people confidential.
Right.
I would give you a shout out, buddy, but I can't. And he's like, no, I took this and we changed the velocities and prescription based on, so 2 of his individual athletes came up very different on their spectrum. And so he changed. One of them had to go up in their velocity. One of them, he's like, oh, no, it's okay if we go down a little bit more. And the other one pretty much stayed, or the other one went up too. And that has made a significant change. Even more recently, though, this is what we're getting at. So right now, we're on the cusp of, I think, actual legit major changes to how we actually train people because of some of the muscle physiology. Before this, I would have said what I told you was like, well, I don't really know exactly how we're going to use this. But Cody Hahn, Mike Roberts out of Auburn, had a study came out, what's today, Thursday? I think the paper came out Monday. And he looked at the fiber type of the people before training. And the fiber type profile going in predicted how successful the training program was. And so this is something I've been talking about for a long time, and he actually showed the first evidence of it. He actually also showed recent evidence of sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is something we've been talking about like talking shit about from Zatsiorsky's days, right? People are like, oh, now it's happening with scientists were like bullshit. Fucking bro science, man. Bro science is like 90 for 100 right now. It turns out you bastards figure stuff out. But anyways, I think this is where we're going to get to, and this is where we're at right now on the cusp of is what we call precision training. It's no longer like, well, okay, well, all of you are going to start off in the same kind of thing, and then based on who's responding, we'll kind of adjust, right? Which is how you would individualize. Well, now it's like, no. Let me take these metrics, and I think actually we can just start here. This is where you're going to be at. We can't figure out your fiber type right now without a biopsy, but with how close imaging is getting, and I know of several things, I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to do that with your cell phone fairly quickly. And so I think that is a place where it's just like, everyone, boom, snap a picture over there. I think you're more like this. Or we have some other non-invasive ways to measure it. And then you get put on different prescriptions based on that. And there's some other good evidence to suggest when you do that, there will be more effective carryover.
So
There's some problems there, but I'll come back to that later.
what would different prescriptions look like for like somebody like Mark who has 80% and then somebody who has like 60%?
So this is when you have to put your thinking cap on. And this is actually where I think coaches are far ahead of scientists. So right now, if we said, okay, Mark is 80%, and you wanted to do a bodybuilding show again. Okay, how long has it been since you did a bodybuilding? Or
Yeah, just almost a year.
okay, year ago. You want to do one. Now, we know you're primarily fast twitch. Do you want to train your fast twitch to make sure those are as big as possible, or do you want to actually train your slow twitch knowing that those are the actual things you lack the most of? I don't actually know. There's no right answer there. Like, that's actually coaching philosophy. What do you want to do? Do you want to, if you're a knockout puncher and you're terrible at wrestling, you want to actually spend all your time wrestling to get a little bit better at it? Or do you want to just make sure that, to hell with it, you're going to make sure that you don't give up your strength, right? Don't give up the golden goose that got you, whatever the hell that saying
Sounds
is.
great.
You get it, right? Well, this is the thing that science is never going to be answered, because that's always going to be a coaching philosophy issue, right? You ride your strength or you shore up your weakness. So I don't know. One of the things, like for Mark, we would say is, hey, for your bodybuilding, I don't know, buddy. Right now, there's a theory that higher rep ranges being something like 15 reps or more, preferentially hypertrophy slow twitch fibers, but like 10 to less, certainly like more 5, preferentially hypertrophy fast twitch fibers. Now, that's never actually been documented. Actually, Brad Schoenfeld and I have been trying to do this for a couple of years, but we can't get any funding to fucking do it. It's a super easy study. We just got to get a little bit of cash. If that were true, and I actually think it is, then I can say, I know you're primarily fast twitch. I know you're going to respond well to like the 1 to 8 or so rep range. You may not respond as well to the 20 to 25, right? But whether you want to do that then specifically because you want to work on your weakness or not, that's up to you. But that's what I can tell you in terms of a training adaptation. And the other piece would be taper. So now, you don't want to do a bodybuilding competition. You want to do a powerlifting meet. Great. Well, one thing we have shown actually is we did a study with cross-country runners, and we looked at 3 weeks of taper, where they reduced their volume by 50%, running volume by 50% in 3 weeks. And we saw about a 10% increase in fast twitch muscle fiber size, force, and velocity with 3 weeks of reduced tapering. The slow twitch fibers didn't change at all. And so what that tells me is, if you're a super fast twitch guy or girl, or a super slow twitch guy or girl, your tapering recommendations should be different. A fast twitch guy like Mark, I would say you need a lot more of a taper. You got to be really careful of the volume. I think you respond really well to backing your volume way down. Somebody who's maybe 50-50 or 60% slow twitch, I would say, you know what, you don't have to cut the volume as much. It's not a big of a problem. I don't know if you actually find that to be true in your training, if you're a person who needs a bigger taper or not.
Yeah, I usually can't do that much stuff. I'll get too sore.
Bingo.
That's
There
what
you
a lot
go.
of people, that's what a lot of
And I'm
strength
signing
athletes-
off, walking off right there. Just kidding. No.
I mean, if somebody gives me a prescription to do 5 sets of 8 or something like that, I'm gonna be very, very sore from that. I'd probably have to use 15 or 20% less than what they suggested in week 1.
And you're 25 years into training.
Yeah, right. I mean, it would kill me. It would
Yeah.
kill me. Whereas like somebody else might do that with no problem. They might do that really easy.
It would bury me.
And the frequency too. I need a whole week.
Yeah.
To recover from it.
Yeah.
But again, if we were to look at it and say, okay, well, you never really done this before, or I haven't done it that much, then we could say, okay, you can do it 3 times a week, but it's going to be at like 40% in week 1, and we'll maybe bump it up and see how you feel, because I might get killed from it.
So that to me is where this stuff is coming, and these papers are coming. There are actually some other biomarkers
I'm pretty
in order?
fascinated by strength aerobics, and that was something that
You mean like Jack LaLanne style? or-
yeah, yeah. The strength aerobics is it's in Vershansky's book,
Yeah, yeah.
Science and Practice of
Yep, yep.
Strength Training or whatever it's called. I utilized a lot of that for recovery from injuries before.
Mhm.
Really, really slow training, tempo training.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The difference being like you don't lock anything out. So if you're bench pressing, the
Totally.
elbows stay bent. You touch your chest, but you don't rest on your chest,
Uh-huh.
and it is it's brutal.
Yeah, I wish somebody had a product that you could maybe wear when you're benching that would take some pressure.
Yeah, no one's thought of anything
No,
like that.
just-
Yeah.
no. Anyways,
Somebody's going to work on that.
no, they
Probably
actually
make a lot of money too.
probably buy houses and cars, and it's got a big old truck out there, man.
Yeah, not bad.
God, what are you compensating for?
I'm
That
trying
thing
to
is
make up for
massive.
yeah, trying to make up for something.
Andrew, any way you could put a ticker on this show about how many genital
Penis
jokes I've made? about
references?
Mark?
It could be a good drinking
Ding.
game,
about
right?
14 at this
Yeah.
point.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't intend to do that coming in. It's
Yeah.
just I think about you. I think of penis, and
I was gonna say it's the vibe, right?
it's the energy in this room.
Just putting that out.
Big
putting
dick
that out
energy.
there.
Yeah.
BDE.
BDE.
Yeah.
No, I think that's actually another interesting area. Is we have spent a lot of time in research looking at muscle in terms of strength training. Probably more time looking at the nervous system. But the third piece to actual muscle contraction or movement in that say is the connective tissue. So what people tend to forget is, yeah, in order for me to lift a barbell, there has to be a signal from my nervous system, my brain or spinal cord or something, that has to tell the muscle to contract. But the muscle is all wrapped in connective tissue. That connective tissue comes together to form one tendon. The tendon connects to the bone. That's what actually moves the bone. Virtually no information on that side of it. We haven't really looked, relative to the other two, at that side. And why I bring that up is the Vergoshansky stuff. Right now, most of us would say, I think that stuff is so effective for rehab and prehab because some reason it targets that area more. So coming back from injury, prevention of injury, whether you look at Cal Dietz's triphasic system or anyone else who's used these same type of things, it looks like the slower those contractions or even the isometric work, which, being a football player and then Olympic weightlifter and then a combat athlete, like didn't do anything because I want to be slow for 12 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was dumb, right? Probably should have done some things where I control the barbell maybe at some point. That stuff I think is very, very helpful. We don't know the science behind it as much as we do this stuff, but I think you're right. And
I think it's a misconception. I think that people think that they have to move stuff really fast in order to train that.
No.
And I think that you can, we've seen it time and time again. We don't need any research for it. We've seen athletes move weights slow, and sure enough, when they get a heavier weight on there, if they're asked to perform it for one rep and they're used to it,
Yeah.
they can call upon their nervous system to move the weight. Now, obviously, you can train yourself up to it
Mhm.
more efficiently by implementing different techniques and stuff. But some of these bodybuilders, like a Jay Cutler and some of these other guys over the years, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I don't really go for one rep maxes." But meanwhile, they're burying 500 pounds, with their ass on the ground for sets of 12 and squat with a minute rest in between sets, and their
Right.
conditioning is just through the roof. And obviously, there's a lot of PEDs involved in that as well. But they have plenty. They're not lacking any strength. Is my point. They're not lacking any. A lot of people might think some of these bodybuilders aren't very functional. But man, if somebody that can move 500 pounds like that,
All right, so I got to give you two stories on that one. Number one, one of the first things I do in my senior level strength and conditioning class is I go through what I kind of think of as the paradigm of anaerobic sport activities. So, there's speed and power and strength, hypertrophy, muscular endurance. Okay, and then I kind of go through and I hallmark like one sport that represents that. So if we look at absolute running speed or movement speed, okay, let's look to the track and field community. They're clearly the best. We get to power. That's obviously Olympic weightlifting. Strength is actually powerlifting, right? But then I throw in world's strongest man. Okay, are they as strong as powerlifters? Well, not per se based on like math, right? But they have a little bit more muscular endurance. Go to CrossFit. Are they as strong as powerlifters? No. Are they? They have probably more muscular endurance though than, and again we're talking super general here, right? Than strongman because they're doing a higher rep range, right? And strongman's going to do 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, but CrossFitter is 600. Right? But now, does that make you think CrossFitters aren't strong? Oh, clearly they are, right? Does that make you think bodybuilders, oh, where do they fit? And people always say, oh, they're all show but no go. Really? Google Ronnie Coleman leg press.
yeah, right.
Google it, right? Those dudes are strong, girls and guys, strong, and they've got a huge work capacity. You can't get that kind of training in without it. So you have to think a little bit, past the initial.
One of the
they're all
things that's
big.
great about bodybuilding too is that it's not killing their joints.
Yeah.
When done correctly.
Right.
Done under
We're
control.
not competing at a high, maximal level.
Yeah, right. And I think that that's something that any athlete can benefit from. Like, look, just go over there and do some curls and do some shoulder presses and don't get fucking hurt. Lower it with a 4-second count.
Yeah.
And work on your breathing and
Anyone who's ever shit on bodybuilding is probably 25.
Yeah.
Or younger.
or just has run into a
See?
douchebag bodybuilder.
Look at
that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing with
Lightweight,
CrossFit
baby.
too.
Lightweight, baby.
Yeah, lightweight. Yeah, buddy.
So look at CrossFit.
CrossFitters are savage. What about Matt Frazier? That guy's a
Unbelievable,
fucking
right?
mutant.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
All those people at the top ends are fucking mutants. All of them. And that's what is that, like 2,000 pounds or something? Insane.
Ronnie Coleman doesn't make any sense.
No, I would love to biopsy that.
Some of
dude.
these dudes that are from the
Don't tell
South,
him it
man,
hurts.
they don't count.
Some of these dudes from the South.
Yeah, those are fucking monsters.
Just unreal. Yeah, telling me he's all show and no go. See, thank you. That's why you're there. You're the man.
Yeah. Well,
The
the
other
guy,
thing I
the
was
guy
gonna
on the
say-
other side was spotting. He was.
Oh,
so-
yeah. Well, then it doesn't count.
You got to
Yeah.
boost.
And plus, he had knee wraps on, so
it's
that
a leg
doesn't
press.
count.
Leg
Yeah,
press.
2,300. I'm sorry.
Oh, fuck him. That's not even that strong. It's a leg press.
Yeah, I mean, totally. That's not functional at all.
No, what could he squat, bro?
Yeah, not functional.
Meanwhile, he squats 800 for reps.
I bet he. Yeah,
Deadlifts 800 for reps.
I bet he couldn't do a kipping pull up or whatever. What's that? What's the one? I'm blanking out.
Muscle
Yeah,
up.
kipping
Muscle
pull-up.
up.
Oh, muscle up.
Bet he can't do a muscle up. He's not functional.
He
at all.
probably could have.
Anyways, interesting story. I'll give you the whole background of strength conditioning in 1 minute, if you will. I tell the story in detail in the first season of my show, but if you look at typically in philosophy, you say this paradigm happens, or this pendulum happens rather, where you start up with a thesis. Okay, a thesis meaning like you have a point, a contention. And then that typically gets met with an antithesis, which is swing the entire opposite direction, right? And then usually that results in you swinging back to the middle and landing in a synthesis, right? Somewhere in the middle. Well, initially, before Arnold came around, right, there's a guy named Dr. Karpovich, and he was anti-strength training. This is bad for you, bad for you, bad for you, bad for you, pitched a whole shit about it. Bob Hoffman showed up. He brought Gimmick and a bunch of these other guys to in front of this guy, to his lab. And all these bodybuilders who were not functional, blah, 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 and they started doing backflips holding 30 pound dumbbells, and they started stretching and all this other stuff, and he was like, holy shit. So he had to acknowledge that no, all this stuff doesn't make you muscle bound. He then switched to think, oh, okay, actually strength training is maybe not bad. Started doing more research in it, kind of on our point earlier, like actually thought about, actually listened to what they're saying, and Hoffman thoroughly convinced him that actually strength training was beneficial. So then the field moved right about the same time, a little bit after that. Arnold came in with pumping iron, boom, boom, boom. And now the whole world thinks, oh my God, not only is this stuff not bad for me, it can make me a real life superhero. Like, think about how powerful that is, right? Like, legit, look, he's a superhero. He's Conan. He's, and look what, the Incredible Hulk, right? And we start seeing these bodybuilders pop up in culture. Well, that's fine. And that ran for 20 or so years as the predominant exercise. When we were kids growing up, there was basically nothing but bodybuilding, right? There's just no other type of strength training. Strongman
There's
was still on the fringe.
All those Muscle Beach movies too.
Yeah.
Back in the day, where it's like the guys are working out and they're getting all the chicks and everything like that.
Exactly, right? Like, this is what everyone wanted to be. So we have this thing building. Joe Weider kicks in because of Arnold, and sports supplements take off, protein, blah, 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 and everyone mass. Well, the problem with that became people started to realize, all right, I'm a normal person. I want to get bigger. I want to look like a superhero, but I got a wife and I got kids and got a job, and I can't spend 2.5 hours in the gym, right? And I get like, this is not working. And oh, by the way, like, I feel like, well, then I get out, because I did, a 2.5 hour bicep curl workout. My back is hurting now. People started to get broken down. And this opened the space up for someone to come in and say, no. Not only are you not going to be there for 2.5 hours, I can get you in and out of the gym, counting your warm-up and cool down in 30 minutes. And this is CrossFit, right? This is their whole pitch. It was the exact antithesis. We'll go the opposite direction. No, we're not doing these small, isolated movements. We're doing the big compound. You're going to clean and squat, and you're getting the fuck out of here. And you know what? So much so, all of that other single joint stuff is useless. Because they
We
had to
don't
go.
need any of those machines.
We don't need any of these machines, right? And then there was a pitch against it. Oh my God, a leg press. That's garbage. Bicep curls. Biceps aren't functional. Motherfucker, do you see anyone without a bicep? You don't think they have a function? Yeah, they do. Well, the problem was that took off, right? And then the pendulum had to swing back because then people started to realize, oh, well, now I'm only doing these same 4 or 5 movement patterns, and my elbow's starting to kill me because everything I do has elbow function, and I'm not training my bicep. Oh, and then my hamstring's getting me because everything I'm doing is a front. Oh, great. And now what is the CrossFit community doing? Almost all of them are finishing their workouts with accessory bodybuilding set movements, right?
Getting
So
jacked and tan.
we're now back in that
Oh,
spot
man.
where it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have thrown out all of bodybuilding.
By the way, I'm not a doctor. I'm not on your level, but that took longer than a minute.
Ah, shit. I did the same thing on one of my videos of my podcast, and the dude,
It's like, it was like 4 minutes long.
yeah, my guy put up like a timer, and it was just like I'm like, this will be done in 5 minutes, and like 9 minutes later, it's just
Yeah.
like -3, -4. Sorry. Point being, maybe we shouldn't have thrown out all the bodybuilding concepts. Maybe we shouldn't throw out all of the CrossFit concepts. And I think actually we're right in the middle of saying, okay, yeah, we need to be efficient with time. Most people don't want to spend 6 hours in the gym every single day to do their wrist curls. But let's get a piece here, let's get a piece here. And we're taking things from the weightlifting community, we're taking things from powerlifting, and now strongman's getting back up, which is I love because this is to me like far more functional, if you will, and fun. And but you come in and do a 20-minute strongman thing. I think for general health, that's the most efficient thing you could ever
I think
do.
it's great. I think the one thing to watch out for would just be, the amount of weight.
Totally.
So I mean, sometimes people think they see these guys flipping these tires and stuff, and you probably don't need 1,000-pound tire. Start out with something that's much easier to manage and realize why you're doing it.
Yeah.
You're not doing it to get on ESPN necessarily. You're doing it more for function.
Why do you think it's so much better though? I'm just curious. Like,
Well, because of I think the movement patterns are much more sustainable. They're much more
like
global.
a farmer's carry, just
Fuck
easy.
yeah.
You just
The learning
pick up
curve is
some
so
stuff,
easy.
Walk
Yeah.
with it.
I mean, a squat's complex. You want to add load and you want to add volume to that. I think it's much easier to, we're going to put this giant yoke thing on your back. You're going to walk.
Even flipping a tire, which has some dangers to like your bicep and stuff, as long as the weight's appropriate, it's not that hard to learn.
Yeah, it's fun. It's novel. It's typically a little more unstable and unpredictable as opposed to like a barbell, which is evenly loaded.
Yeah.
And I think there's some
of these movements too, they allow you to have like a rounded back. For example, like
Totally.
Picking up a
Stone.
sandbag
Yeah.
or the stones and stuff. It's because the weight's not that heavy. Whereas like if you're trying
In
a
the position.
500-pound deadlift, it's like that's probably not a great idea to lift with a rounded back.
Yeah, exactly. So it controls for people a lot like that. I think it also does a really good job of exposing major holes. It's like
Yeah.
major holes, and you're like, if you can deadlift 600 pounds, but you can't pick up a 150-pound stone, like
Right.
something's amiss there, right?
Yeah, something's not right.
So I think that stuff is really, really good, and I'm very happy to see that coming back. And
Well,
also, it just feels cool to drag something that feels more germane to the world.
yeah.
A yoke walk feels awesome too. Like
Yeah.
these things, they just feel like barbaric in some way. They feel
Yeah,
I
I think
they're fun.
dragging a big ass sled.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck. I remember
It's
actually
empowering. Feels good.
I think it was after last time I was on the show, that fall, when I was out hunting, we happened to harvest a nice buck that was really fucking far out, and it took my brother and I have no idea how long to drag that son of a bitch out, and it was pretty close to when I'd been here, and so all I kept thinking about was that goddamn tank. It's just like I'm dragging this thing, and I'm dragging this thing, like fuck, this is functional. Like your hands are dying, you're blown to pieces, it's cold out, like footing's uneven. I mean, it's just not there, and I was just like, yeah, this feels good. We just can't. It's hard to find a dead deer
How
to
much
drag
that
every
damn
day.
thing weigh?
The deer we shot probably 800-900 pounds.
Oh my god.
I'm just fucking kidding. It's like 200 pounds. 800 was like
I was
bullshit.
where'd you find an 800-pound deer?
Yeah, it was big though. It was nice. So big fatty.
On the because we touched on it a little bit, we like longevity and aging, etc. So there's multiple things I want to try and get at here. First off, in terms of longevity, is there anything that like you think that people can be doing right now? Because there's Rhonda Patrick's talked about sauna, and there's things about like fasting in terms of helping out with that. What do you think are things that athletes, not like your super high level UFC athletes, because you wouldn't expect them to fast or anything, but athletes can do for longevity and recovery? Recovery is the second part of it. Things that like powerlifters, jiu-jitsu athletes can be doing easily to really like help with recovery, because I've found that for myself. I started just doing sauna a lot recently, and I mean, it could just be totally mental, but I feel like I recover much better with all of the workouts that I do over time. So it's two-pronged: longevity and then recovery.
Yeah, we'll do the longevity piece first.
Okay.
If you just simply look and think through the things the human body is supposed to be able to do, Just challenge each one. Challenge one in an appropriate fashion that allows you to be a little bit overloaded, but not buried. That's it. To me, what that stacks up to be is something that challenges your heart rate to get really high. You want to do it on a spin bike in class? Fantastic. You want to go to cardio kickboxing class? Hey, well, that's great. You want to sprint upstairs? You want to pull a giant sled? You want to drag a stone or an atlas around? It doesn't really matter. The thing is, you're trying to challenge the cardiovascular system. So do anything that is within your abilities, your technical skill, your desire, that you'll want to do often. Piece number one. Piece number two, something that requires you to sustain consistent elevated energy output. This, most people would call that steady state cardio. I don't call it that for a whole host of reasons. It's a poor description. Again, actually in Monday in my class, my students will be doing this. And they'll be doing a 45-minute circuit that's at a steady state, not an interval circuit. And it will be things like, I'll be doing some bear crawls up stadium stairs for a few minutes, and they're going to rotate over, and we'll do like some medicine ball toss and chase things. But there's no intervals. It can steadily stay in the same output. They'll do some other movement stuff. There'll be some Turkish get-ups, and there'll be some light other, and they're going to move consistently for 40 minutes, and their heart rate will be within about the same 10 beats per minute the entire time. It's not going up and down. Just something that challenges your ability. This could be a walk. This could be go hiking for 2 hours. No problem, right? So that's piece number two. Piece number three, something that requires you to contract hard. Whatever that contraction hard means to you. It needs to be safe. It needs to be technical. It needs to be within your desire. All those pieces. That's what we want to be getting at. And it's primarily because of that fast twitch fiber thing. We can't lose those. And those things die out fast. And when they die out, they're gone forever. So if you're comfortable going to the local gym and doing a seated bench press, and that feels good, you feel a nice strong contraction, you feel comfortable there, start there. Doesn't really particularly matter. Try to do several different movement patterns and try to do at least something in each muscle area. But if that means you're going to go and do bent row, seated chest press on a machine, and some leg press to start off with, great. We'll get you there. And then the last piece is something that makes you contract fast. Could be the exact same machines. Cut it in half and just try to go fast, as fast as you're comfortable with. The adage I actually like is, as soon as you stop jumping, you start dying. Right? Now, I'm not saying like, oh, I haven't exercised in 20 years. I'm going to go out and do some plyometrics. Like, let's use our head here. You can be sensible. Yeah. Minimize the eccentric component to that stuff. But those are the four pieces, and I think of longevity, like that needs to be there. You want to start adding other stuff to that, great, and we could be more detailed. Somebody I would certainly add assistance bodybuilding stuff, muscular endurance things, some rep to fail stuff. But for the most part, those are the four big areas that I take for longevity. You could also, more importantly, you could combine that stuff. The fifth one I'll sometimes add is I think there's actually a lot of merit to what I'll call body control. So this could be something like an animal flow or a yoga or something like that where you actually have to move yourself in non-specifically planned movement patterns. But you can combine that stuff. So do a 10-minute yoga flow or whatever, and then do 10 minutes of strength training, and then finish up with some intervals on the bike. Could be in and out of there in 30 minutes, right? So this could be a 2-day work plan, and you can knock out all 5 of these. It could be a 3-day week. You could do an hour and a half each one of them. You could just really go crazy depending on your aptitude. So that's how I'll answer the longevity piece.
Okay.
In terms of recovery, we have to be very careful with our methodologies for recovery. Love the sauna like anybody else does. But if you're an athlete who is consistently training in areas in ways that make you sweat and lose 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 pounds of muscle, we don't need to add a sauna to that picture. So if you're in jiu-jitsu and you're wearing a gi constantly, I don't need you adding more sauna work. That's not going to help. It's not the sauna per se that's helpful.
It's maybe the relaxation.
People get lost. The fucking thing becomes the thing. It's not the sauna. It's the fact that you got really hot. So get hot however you want. If you don't do anything, I have my grandpa actually with the sauna because he doesn't exercise at all. And I'm like, fantastic, good for you. If you're training in a gi or you're doing kickboxing class and you're walking out of there puddles of sweat 3 times a week, you don't need to add a sauna to that, right? If it helps you with relaxation, sure, benefits to that too. But a lot of people get that from the workout, right? They're going to get the endorphin, they're going to get whatever it is, right? So if you have nothing in your space, in your life, it could be your 10-minute walk in the morning, right? I don't need to then, there's nothing magical about the sauna. What's magic is what happened inside your body. Like we talk about this all the time. Exercise is an external stimulus we use to cause an internal adaptation. Fuck the external part. Doesn't matter. Whatever is causing the internal stimulation, that's what we're after. So pick whatever method you want. So I'm great that you're implementing a sauna. Great. I think for lifters, great, fine also, but that could potentially reduce recovery if you do it too much.
Make sure to even if you make sure to like rehydrate, because obviously you're losing a lot of water, but it just becomes, because obviously I trained jiu-jitsu in a gi, so I'm sweating already, right?
Fuck all. Then I wouldn't add any sauna to you.
Okay.
I mean, keep doing it. Like, if you're lying it for sure, and tell them
Yeah.
to come back in a year and be like, no, dude, I'm telling you, it helps me. And I'll be like, great. Like, I want you to win. I don't want you to, I want you to do what's best for you. I would say for you then, maybe there's other things we need to implement for recovery instead of the sauna, because it's probably just giving you more dose of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Could we find something else to substitute that gets you that same mental relaxation? I'm not convinced in the science at all that it's anything special to the sauna. How about an ice bath? Have you jumped in an ice bath?
I haven't jumped in an ice bath in a long time.
Yeah. So this is what I would say is you probably need to spend those 3 or 4 days a week that you're getting in the sauna in the ice bath. That would probably be a better use of your time, because that's the stimulus you're not getting.
Mhm.
It's the entire opposite of the other side of the equation, right? You're already getting enough of this side of the equation, which is hot and sweaty. So jump into there. But we have to be careful how we dose these things. There's a pro and con to everything, right? There's no free passes in physiology. Everything pays price somewhere. So you just may not be seeing that price.
Well, a lot of times too, the benefit of getting cold is that your body is trying to regulate itself back to being as warm as it was, right? And the same thing with
happens.
getting hot. You get hot and your body's trying to regulate itself back to being cold, right?
Well, we can see too that I would actually.
It's like a little bit of almost the opposite, right, of what we think, I guess. Is my thought.
Yeah, right. If when are you doing, what part of the day, what time of the day are you doing the sauna? These are other questions we'd have to answer, because sometimes the sauna can actually help us get into a sympathetic fight or flight. Sometimes it can push you into parasympathetic. So we have to think about how are you using it specifically. For an athlete, there is good data that suggests the faster post-workout you can get into a parasympathetic state, that enhances long-term adaptation. Typically, when we walk out of this gym, right, and we got the smelling salts and we smack the chalk all around, and then we just walk out, you're going to walk out of here and be sympathetic for a long time. That's going to harm recovery a lot. It's going to harm long-term adaptation. And so maybe we want to walk out of here, do 5 minutes of art of breath, Brian McKenzie down regulation stuff, and hey, now we're actually going to get long-term. Same thing after the gi, right? You just went 3 or 4 rounds that you rolled live. Probably should do some down reg before we walk out of there, right? Now, if the sauna is helping you feel that roll, fine, but you don't need to spend maybe 45 minutes in the sauna. We could have done that in 3 minutes with some breath work.
Yeah.
Right? Or some other things, right? And so there's just a lot of variables. I feel like everyone's like, God, this guy hates sauna. Like, I don't. I just think people are way too excited about it right now. They're not thinking. They're just like, oh, the sauna, I got to get a sauna. No, not necessarily. We need to think about all the options on the table. Your lifestyle, what else is going on, your brain, how your chemistry works. The cold can do the same thing. Some people that puts into super sympathetic, but after they get out, they typically have a massive parasympathetic response. So for sure, when you walk out, you're going to be sympathetic. You're going to be fight or flight. But again, oftentimes, and the research shows this, you will respond by getting into a major parasympathetic state. And so some people, and I've had several athletes do this, will take ice baths at night, right before bed, and they'll just zonk out. Some people can't get back in that parasympathetic, and it's like, I couldn't sleep all night, I was wired. Okay, great. So then we mix and match, and I have some that'll take a hot bath or a sauna right before bed. We just have to make sure, I'm like, hey, don't get in there and sweat out 8 pounds. 20 minutes, you're gone, right? Play the music you want to do, and then we're out of there, or not, right? Depending on if it puts it, but some of them, they get too hot, and they're staying up hot, and I can't sleep all night. So it just depends.
On that ice bath, ice bath versus cryo, is there a difference there?
Oh yeah. Very good
Yeah.
question. Research right now will suggest for muscle soreness, they're fairly equivalent. Okay. Seems to be okay. Everything else, basically the cold water immersion wins. So if I have an athlete who's sore a lot or in the middle of a camp, like Zoila right now will pop in quite often, just because of what she does, but get in the water if you can. It's not the same thing at all. All the other benefits you get doesn't seem to be shaking from the cryo. So sorry if you guys just spent money on a cryo or you bought into a company or something. Yeah. They sucked you in, but the cold water immersion is cheaper. It's more effective, scalable. You guys should just have one in here. I saw that look on your face. He's
man.
like, no way.
Brutal.
That'd be great.
You guys got to get in.
I'd love it.
Yeah, is just like a cold shower cold enough, or do we need
No.
ice? No. Okay.
No, well, I mean, it
so that's
depends
just
on,
uncomfortable then.
It depends on the outcome you're looking for.
Mhm.
So why are you using the cold is the question I would ask. Some of the benefits of the shower are mimicked, but not all of them. So some people that like, say, take a cold shower and they feel it wakes them up more. They're more, okay, that's going to be just fine. The physiological benefits, though, probably not coming in terms of that. So just don't be a baby. Get in the water. It ain't that cold. It's that cold, but it ain't that hard.
You're mentioning, getting done with a workout and then kind of still being fired up and stuff like that. Like, have you seen any studies done with like taking a nap or going to sleep after a training session?
I have not, but I haven't looked.
Hmm.
So that's a really good question. I don't know.
I wonder because, I wonder if it would maybe help, kind of lock it in more or something like that. Because I know, like Mike O'Hearn, he does his real early training, early morning training sessions, and he goes home and eats and he takes a nap.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious
But
on whether that
what has that guy
aids
ever done?
recovery every,
What's he?
I
doing?
know, yeah, he's kind of out of shape. Maybe I shouldn't have brought him
I mean,
up.
he's just a soft old guy. What's he, 300 pounds? You gonna take advice from a 300-pound guy, Mike?
Yeah, he's not in very good shape for being in his 50s.
No, I think I think it would be hard to take a nap in a sympathetic.
Right.
So almost by default, I don't know what is caused there. I mean, if you have the time, that's great.
Yeah, if you can figure it out, right? Why
Yeah.
not?
I mean, I think if you can make it a priority, it's probably.
How do
gonna
you help
things.
some of your athletes sleep? Because sleep can be a tough thing for people nowadays with all the technology and
Yeah.
distractions that we have.
Well, the obvious ones I'll just sidestep. Getting off your phone, especially the athletes. You guys get this too, I'm sure, Mark. You get a lot of hate.
Oh yeah, all the
It's
time.
just not good to see that.
Yeah.
Right before you go to sleep. Most people, or some
Yeah.
people, can just roll off their back.
Mhm.
But even after years, it's still like sometimes there's still like,
Yeah, it still jabs at you.
yeah. So getting them the hell away from that, even unprovoked. It's mostly unprovoked stuff. Just random tags of "fuck Mark Bell." What? Like it just doesn't.
I've had other companies use the code like "fuck Mark Bell" and they get like 25% off. Yeah, pretty good.
Whatever it is, I'm buying.
Yeah, I know.
Tell me, I'm in.
I ordered.
I didn't even want to order this thing, but God,
That's great.
just hating Mark Bell so much. Why you be so petty and such a hater? Like if it was your buddy doing it, I would say that's funny. But
Beyond
anyways,
that, yeah.
whatever. It's like that's what are we 3? So those are the same. The blue light thing, if they have to, it's typically not my first thing I go to. But if they're into it, or if we've tried 3 or 4 of the things, we'll do the blue light blockers. Breathing drills are big. I would say 90+% of the people I work with, we can get them on very specific breathing drills that are personalized to them. So it's a particular cadence of inhale, hold, exhale, hold. That'll help them get into that state. And sometimes that takes some playing around. We have to figure out, okay, that actually riled you up a little bit too much. We need to change the ratio of inhaling and holding and things like that. Brian's got an app coming out really, really soon that is just wonderful, that we've been working on for years now, that'll really help this personalized breathing stuff. And we've been using it with actually my athletes for a while now, that actual app, and that's been helpful. There's other tricks you can do too. I would say play with the cold or hot. Try one of the two. May help, may not at all, but that seems to be effective. Eating right before bed helps. Protein and carbohydrate, it really, really, really helps, particularly if you're the people that have a hard time sleeping through the night. If you put in a nice little bolus of protein and carbohydrate, it's a very high success rate with those people. Now, if you're like my athletes and in weight class sports, you have to then account for those calories. Right. So you can't you're just going to wake up fat. But it doesn't seem to be. In fact, if you look at Mike Osborne's research out of Florida State, it's very, very clear that doesn't actually add anything to fat mass. If anything, it helps you add lean mass. Ormsby, sorry, Mike. I don't know why I said Osborne. Mike Ormsby stuff. So you can do that. You just have to calculate the calories in the back end, and it helps people typically, or I should say, oftentimes wake up with a more stable blood glucose. They don't wake up as like, oh my God, I got hit by a, here they wake up like feeling refreshed.
Right.
So that can be as simple as like Nathan Tomasello, 125-pound wrestler. It's whole milk right before bed. He handles dairy very, very, very well. So no problem there. Maybe some added protein powder in there. Zoila does some just like egg whites. Some of the times we played with different things with other people. They need more food. You could do like a little bit of slower releasing carbohydrates. All those things can be very, very helpful. So if you're someone who's like, man, I just can't, I struggle staying asleep, something like that, try that. You're not just going to wake up 30 pounds fatter, right? And just make those calories come out the rest of your day. It can be a good trick too.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some other things you use for recovery? Like, are you into supplements at all, or recovery drinks when they're done with their workouts? Or
Sure.
like that?
Yeah. In terms of overall recovery, the first thing I'll do is try to actually figure out why they're not recovering in the first place, and then I address that. I will go to supplements, but that's far down my list. Number one is, well, what's the training? Is the training program appropriate? Is it periodized? And I don't mean like linear, but I just mean like
maybe it's just too hard.
Is there a plan?
Yeah.
Like, do we have some sort of day when we're going to back off? Is there a week when we're going to back off? Are you just training your ass off, which what a lot of them do? They just train as hard as they can, and then like a week before the fight, they don't do as much, and then they try to fight, and then as soon as they're healthy again, they just do the same. That's not a training program. Like, that's just. Then you wonder why we have recovery problems. So number one, like, is there? And almost always there's no plan. It's just like, oh, well, train. So I fixed almost all recovery programs with that. Number two, are you eating enough calories? Period, right? So oftentimes they're calorie scared, or the quality, or your ratio is just screwy, or you do not pay attention to it at all, what you're eating, right? So it's like, well, some days I don't even know, I'm 80% carbs, and other days, like, all right, let's get a stable, consistent plan so we can get a baseline and figure out what's going on. The vast majority of recovery issues I have done with
a really simple thing too that I've noticed with people that have trouble eating the amount of food that they're that they kind of need to recover from their workouts,
which is true.
It's just throwing in some carbs, because it just makes it easier to eat the food. So like if you have, if you eat some like ground beef or something, it tastes pretty good, but it tastes so much better with some rice, or have steak and a potato or something. You got like the two kind of pairing together. It's a lot easier, and you can eat more.
Yeah. And we typically will then also, I try to get them, if we can, to consume some sort of carbohydrate and protein during the workout. That really, really helps with that. Now, some
like
sports,
a donut.
Probably not our go-to choice, but we could fit it in if it fits your macros.
Just some sort of liquid.
Yep,
like
typically, right? So in jiu-jitsu, I mean, you're on the mat for an hour plus, right? Well, there's breaks. Instead of sipping on water in between rolls, let's sip on this drink, right? And now we're going to actually build in 30 to 40, 60, 80 grams of carbohydrate, 10 to 30 grams of protein. That just helped a lot, because a lot of times they do that, and then they get up, they shower, etc. Then they got to go on a media call, they got to go do an interview, something, and then they got to drive the next space, and there's virtually no downtime. Then they're training again, right? So getting that stuff in the workout helps the recovery process get started immediately. If that's not possible, we're going to food.
And there's a lot of
right
research
afterwards.
behind that shows that it aids in
Tons.
protein synthesis and stuff like that, right?
Well, the two primary factors are protein synthesis, of course, and muscle glycogen restoration. And that's very, very, very clear. People will look at the research and say, well, there's no evidence that you have to have your protein immediately post-workout, the whole post-exercise anabolic window. Actually, we have some new research on that that I could get into quickly. But that's true. Sure. What matters is the 24-hour window. Okay, but that's under a couple of assumptions. One, you're fasting when you work out. And two, you only work out once a day and maybe even once every couple of days. That's not true of my athletes. So you have to condense that window into like 6 hours. I have to have protein there immediately, because they are training again 2 or 3 hours later and then training again. And then that doesn't account for what is clear is the carbohydrate timing matters. So while the timing of protein post-exercise maybe doesn't matter as much for these sort of things, carbohydrate does.
It sounds like your athletes almost remind me of when I did my bodybuilding show, where it's like, man, you better get out in front of this thing or you're fucked.
Yeah.
You better you better be ahead all the time. You better be well prepared with your food all the time.
Yep.
You better. So in their case, the requirement of these post-workout or even intra-workout shakes and stuff, it probably, doesn't matter so much about the specifics of like what it is. I'm sure you can kind of nitpick and say like, oh, let's use this carb and let's do this.
Yep.
It's probably more of just what you talked about, where it's like, it might be 3 hours before they get to their next meal.
Yes.
And now they're behind. They're not getting the nutrients, not getting the salt. They're not getting the potassium.
They make bad choices, and the training quality goes really down. And you can't afford to lose a training session. You just can't. It's going to hurt too much, and literally your chance of injury goes up. If you're gassed, if you're a little bit wobbly, and you're trying to not be a bitch, and right, which is the things they're telling themselves, and they're trying to go through it when they're getting every signal that says like your legs aren't there right now, and your training partners are like, come on, you got to fight in 3 weeks. Something happens, and it's just like, and it always It's like, yeah, well, fuck, man, I didn't eat after this thing because I had to go do this Instagram live thing. And you're like, but it's part of their job. Like, this is how they sell fights, and the more fights they sell, the more money they make. It's their income, so it's hard to knock it. One actually thing that is fun, it's extremely preliminary, Kara's study, where we looked at this post-exercise recovery window, and that term is very big. So keep in mind, that's like 80 different things, what I just said there. So one of these little aspects, or two of them actually, we looked at, which is the molecular cascade, which controls carbohydrate utilization. Right? One of the things that we're seeing very clearly is that post-exercise window differs between the genders. And so this is an area I think we're really going to get into is, well, you know what, maybe the recommendations need to be different for women and men. Maybe it is more or less important, and I'm not going to tell you which one yet.
There's
for
differences
the
between men and women.
No, they're actually it's all in title,
Okay.
just in name. No actual physiological differences. But this is the stuff where we can enhance. It's like, you know what, maybe it is important for men and or women, but maybe it's not as important for the other species.
I want to know so bad right now.
I mean, we know like the numbers are extremely clear. It's not like 10%; it's like double. So
That's pretty.
so that'll be coming out soon.
Pretty crazy. I remember last time you were here too. You mentioned that the carbohydrates, in terms of like bodybuilding or whatever the activity that is that you're doing, will go kind of directly into the muscles that you exercised, right? So if you, for example, if you have a lagging body part, your chest or something like that, you train your chest.
Yes.
Have some carbohydrates post workout. Theoretically, it could kind of
Well, I don't think theoretically.
help you head in the right direction.
Pretty clearly. Yeah, I mean, especially acutely, you're going to see water retention is going to go in there, which is going to be a good thing. It's going to follow the carbohydrate. The cells in the actual exercising tissue would be much more sensitive for quite a bit of time for both protein and carbohydrate. I think that's clearly established. You have to then balance that throughout the rest of the day. We have to be careful of what we can do with so protein's pretty unique, right? So your muscles are made of protein. Well, if you say trained your traps like crazy, but you didn't train your hamstrings, and your protein intake was exactly what you needed to be or lower, you will start robbing the hamstrings of the protein and taking it to the traps. And this is why the one protein is like typically almost everything we do, regardless of sport, that's the one that's kind of fixed. Like just don't mess with protein almost ever until the very, very end of the weight cut, because of you're gonna pay for it somewhere. We can't make up the amino acids. We can fluctuate back and forth between how we get energy from fat and carbohydrate, and that seems to be not identical but very interchangeable. Protein is not. So we have to be very, very careful of maintaining that. The other thing is, look, fat post-exercise, number one, it blocks protein synthesis. I shouldn't say blocks. It may compromise it. And number two, it doesn't help in restoring muscle glycogen. So like this is a consideration. Having said that, we have to then think about context. So if I'm like any of us and we're training, say 5, 7, 8 times a week, and I trained yesterday at noon. Yeah, okay, trained yesterday at noon. And then I didn't train last night. I'm not going to train this morning. Maybe in this, okay, well, we get busy today. I don't get a training session in. Then I got a bunch of stuff tomorrow on flight, and end up being 2.5 days before I work out. Okay, now, I hope that doesn't happen, but let's say that happens. Well, making sure I got my carbohydrates immediately post my noon workout yesterday is probably not a super big deal, because the next time I go to train, I've had 2.5 days to replenish. I'm going to be just fine. So we have to think about context, right? If you're going to go eat, you're going to go work out the last day before you hop on a plane to go to Italy, like I'm pretty sure you're going to eat enough pasta over there. Your muscle glycogen
I got it taken care of.
Just fine, right? You look very, very full right now. Just very full.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. So we have to think all these factors, right? This is why, my job when I work with some of these athletes, it's very complicated, because I'm trying to factor in, not just like give them a workout plan or give them a nutrition plan. Like, what else is going on in your life? Let's talk about the recovery. What do you have access to? Oh, you don't get this. Oh, you also live with your mom. She's a giant pain in your ass. You're always getting woke up to this. Okay, and the kids scream. All this stuff, the whole thing is mosaic, and it changes everything. So we have to be able to look into multiple aspects of under the human performance umbrella and think, well, we can't fluctuate or move this piece. In some cases, that's the training, right? Like, for whatever reason, like you won't let me mess with your training. Okay, fine. Well, can we enhance your recovery then? Okay, yes. Well, can we get more sleep? No, because of this. Okay, well, can we do this? Yeah, okay, great. Well, then that's the area we're going to go to. And maybe I won't even have a conversation about carbohydrates or food, because the athlete's terrified of it.
Do you try to sometimes encourage your athletes to try to get out of certain environments, or
Yep.
do you not mingle in their personal life too much?
Well, I have one particular athlete who has had extreme personal life issues the last year, and I will be an open ear when that athlete needs to come to things. But
Right.
it's also like,
You express the concern, and then you let them decide on kind of like what they're.
well, I take a more of what's called Socratic method. Okay, so this is how Socrates taught. Instead of me going and saying, Mark, hey, look, you really got to dump your boyfriend. Like, he's a giant pain in the ass. It's things
But
like,
I love him, and he's standing right here.
I love you too.
right? You guys need to break up. Get out of it, right?
We can't quit each other.
I'm
I need
gonna
him for the warmth.
I'm gonna let you come to that conclusion yourself by saying things like, "Man, okay, let's look at last competition. How can I help you do better? What area do you think is having the biggest problem? I'm not recovering. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, let's think about all the things that go into recovery. And what are these areas the biggest problem? How's our nutrition for recovery? How's this? Okay, how's our overall stress? I mean, I know where I'm going with this the whole time, right? God, well, Mark and I have been fighting a lot lately, and boy, and then you just and you listen, and it's sort of like, and they sort of, oh, man, me. And then they'll ask you, like, do you think I should break up with them? And I always will say, look, I'm never going to tell you to fire a coach. I'm never going to tell you to leave a gym. Those words will never come out of my mouth. What will come out of my mouth is the stress equation is unbalanced right now. Something has to be adjusted. I'm here to help you however I can. Almost always they're like, yeah, I got
Nsima, we're done.
Do you even care if your athletes like listen to this? Like, if you have an athlete listening right, like, damn, Andy, dude, that's me. Does that matter?
Let me tell you another story.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people listening right now. All pissed off.
My wife has a master's degree in behavioral sciences, or not behavioral sciences. What's it called?
Psychology?
No, well, her undergraduate degree is in psychology, and then but behavioral.
We have science?
No,
Oh, sorry.
it's changing people with bad behaviors.
Yeah, gotcha.
I'm sorry, honey. Right, and so she works with elementary school, kindergarten, special ed, and her whole jam is like, you take a kid who's autistic or Downs or just has extreme ADHD or something, and you have to cue them very specifically, or else you make the problem worse, right? And it's oftentimes it's not intuitive. You're gonna have to do these weird little tricks. Well, about a year or so in our relationship, we got a dog, and training these autistic kids and training the dog are the exact same thing. Like you can use the same tricks. I'm like, and it's some of it's unbelievable. It's like parlor tricks, how effective these things can be. Wow. So I watched her doing it. And I was like, damn, like you're really good at this. And then like the wheels just started turning. And I started thinking, it was like a flashback in a movie. Where like I would flash back to like that one time we were out and she did this to me. And then one time we were at home, she did this. And I was like, you motherfucker, you have been fucking me for a year now. You have totally mind fucked me. You completely turned me into your like little puppeteer here. And I'm like, son of a bitch.
Hey, that's not only your wife, buddy. That's everybody's wife.
Oh my god.
So my point being, I don't care if they see the magic behind the veil.
Yeah.
Because they don't know all the tricks yet. I'll still get them. So watch on, ladies and gents. You're still screwed.
Damn.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you do have to. There's a fine line, of course, between lying to them, which I will do, and simply trying to speak to them in a manner that's going to be most effective for them and not effective for me. So I don't speak to them the way I like to be spoken to as an athlete. I try to figure out what's actually going to help them make an adjustment, and that's how I'm going to target them. Right? And so, in fact, if you were to randomly poll all the athletes that I have or have worked with and talked about like my personality traits, some of them would be like, what? He's like that? Because like I'm not going to be.
Right.
Some of them I'm really sweet with. Some of them I only say mean things to. Some of them I'm really supportive of. The other ones, and you'll kind of go back and forth. And then all of them are sitting here thinking like, no, I've only fucking heard the mean stuff. Where's the sweet part?
Have
But you have to dose that properly.
any of your athletes reached out and gotten like some sports psychology from?
As many of them as I possibly can.
Yeah.
We are
And you
fortunate.
found that to be effective?
In our department, Cal State Fullerton, we had 2, and just recently we had 3, actually 4 of the most talented, most prestigious sports psychologists in the world. As good as I brag about our muscle and strength training program, our sports psych trumps us.
It's really all mental.
We always go back and forth. One of them actually just moved here to Sac State.
Yeah.
She's
Oh wow.
I'd love
Andrea
to have her on
Becker.
the podcast for sure.
Oh, we should definitely. She was the first female ever hired for a male sport at UCLA.
Oh, awesome.
I took him to a national championship. She's done
Shit,
all
that's
kinds of
great.
stuff. She's a beast.
Yeah, we need more chicks on the show for sure.
She did college softball player at Tennessee, I think, but just an absolute savage.
Awesome.
But the other two in our program are really good. The same thing, like they're in Rio and on our Olympic teams, and they got national championships and other stuff. As many of my athletes as I can, I have conversations, and people still must understand what sports psychology is. It's not psychiatry. They're not therapists. Like, for example, Tracy Statler in our department, she does the mental side of excellence. So you're not going to sit down with her and she's going to be like, well, tell me why you're upset today. Like, no, it's going to be things like biofeedback. So you'll sit in their sports psych lab and there'll be a thing where you'll put a heart rate on and there'll be a screen that pops up and the screen is all black and white. And they'll do something to elevate your heart rate. And then they're teaching you, based on how quickly you can lower your heart rate, the screen starts becoming in color. And if your heart rate gets back up, it goes back to black and white. So it's things like, can you take something that is typically not autonomic, or something that is typically autonomic, so you don't have somatic control over, and can you make yourself, with your mind, have control of something like your heart rate? That's what sports psychology does. And so
it's the training of your brain, basically.
It's performance.
Yeah.
It's performance psychology, right? So it's optimizing focus. It's optimizing excellence, right? So we need you to be in this peak state where you can control as many of this stuff in your brain as possible. It's not therapy, right? It's there. And so that's what our, just like I focus on my research in the side of performance stuff, they focus on not the like, let's talk about reducing your stress and blah, blah, blah. No, let's talk about making you just a fucking savage upstairs. And so because of that, I talk nonstop shit to them, and it doesn't faze them one bit. Like, I just talked to her, I talked so much shit about how I'm like, well, yeah, that's great and all. I was focused and I was overall really happy, and then I was still weak as hell because I didn't talk to Andy. So
you touched on something that I'm curious about.
I'm sorry. I realized, by the way, I've been swearing a lot. I know we're not supposed to swear in this program, right?
No.
Yeah, you shouldn't be doing that, buddy.
I'm sorry. But go ahead.
You're in a lot of trouble.
But you touched on, like, after heavy exercise, like breathing techniques to bring the heart rate back down to relax, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned with her, watching a screen and doing things to allow yourself to not get affected by what's going on, like keeping your heart rate down, etc. Do you find, like, working with athletes, do you ever have to, especially when they're like doing their exercise or sparring or whatever, do you mess with the way that they breathe? And the reason why I ask you, the reason why I'm asking you this is because, like, obviously, like, when doing jujitsu, I don't nasal breathe the whole time. I just breathe through my nose. Obviously, when I'm doing something very high intensity and when my heart rate starts to go up, I breathe a little bit more through my mouth, just a little bit. But I do find that when I watch other individuals roll and they start to do that, they become extremely erratic. Yeah. Right? How do you think that affects, or how do you change that in athletes to help them breathe better, to perform better?
Rob Wilson, Brian McKenzie, artofbreath.com. I don't know what the URL is, but those guys got it on lock. They're not too far over. I don't know if you know Brian.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You should have him come over one to do a little seminar.
It's like it's San Francisco area, right?
Yeah, he is now. He's not too far from, I think he could never probably be too far from Kelly Starrett.
Right.
Just like you guys. Just bromance times a million. But those dudes got it, like, really, really figured out different cadence. And we have integrated this system with several. One of the athletes I've been fortunate to work with for a long time, she's a multiple-time world champion. She does almost the exact same thing, and it's almost like a sports psych thing with her now, because now in competition, she will, even on her competition days, she does nasal only as long as she can. It's what Brian and Rob call the gear system. So there's gear 1, 2, 3, 4. And the reason she does this, or not one of the reasons, but one of the byproducts of this is she knows when she's going against her opponent and she feels the same thing, in her head, she's like, got her. I know, like, even if she's more tired than her, she's like,
yeah.
And she's like, even though she wants to breathe out her mouth too, she's like, got her. And it snaps her mentally, and she's there. So there's that piece. But of the physical piece of it too, one of the things we've been actually messing with recently, because of Brian and Rob, is looking at what's called respiratory exchange ratio. So this is how much fat versus how much carbohydrate you're actually burning. And it does look like that changes based on mouth versus nasal breathing. So we need more work in this area for sure. This is not proven, like, stamped hard science.
I burned a crazy amount of carbs. I had a test done here at UC Davis, and it was like, which is weird because I don't really typically eat that many carbs.
What did you do?
So it was kind of confusing.
Were you standing or were you actually moving?
Oh no, I was moving. Yeah, I was on a treadmill.
How hard?
I was just
moderate?
like, It got beyond that. I mean, I was walking, but the treadmill, was going up and the speed was going up. I didn't get to like a run,
Yeah.
but it was I don't know. It wasn't too aggressive, but
We'd have to take some resting measures
Yeah.
first to get it better.
yeah, and I'm sure it would also matter like what I ate the
100%.
days leading up to it and stuff
Well,
like
right
that,
before.
too.
If you eat a
Right.
bunch of carbohydrate right before, you know what happens?
You burn carbs.
Burn more carbs. And you know what you burn less of? Fat. You eat a bunch of fat right before, you burn more fat, but you burn less carbs, right? So it doesn't matter. Equation is the same. Like, eating carbs before workout doesn't make you not lose fat.
Right.
The fat loss will be the exact same. People confuse fat burning for fat loss. Those are not the same thing at all. Anyways, back to your point. It looks like nasal breathing potentially helps you burn or helps you utilize a little bit more fat, where mouth breathing shifts you over to a little more carbohydrate. So we're almost finished with our first study, and we've got probably 50 or so subjects we've already collected, so a decent sample size here. That can also be measured with, there's correlations between that and what they call state and trait anxiety. And so there's something here. We're very early, but there is something here with how you use your air, how that relates to your psychological state, and how that relates to your metabolic fuel usage. The best I can say is something there right now. Like, we just don't know.
Well,
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
It's
mouth breathing,
sensational.
there's people that will go as far to say mouth breathing makes you dumb.
Well, Brian would probably say that. I won't.
Yeah, I've heard people say, not necessarily make you dumb, but I've heard people kind of say that it can limit your capacity
Yeah, I don't think I
for
believe
learning
that.
in children and stuff like that. I mean, people go pretty far with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is this whole thing blowing up these goddamn balloons? I see people doing that all the time.
Are those condoms? No. No, there's a lot. I don't want to jump into their worlds, but
Yeah.
this is what they're trying to do with the balloon there very specifically is it's a very quick tell. It's kind of like having someone do a box squat. In other words, it's a quick tell of your breathing mechanics. Okay, like I can watch you box squat immediately with one rep and be like, okay, like I can see if you know this
Yeah,
movement
you
pattern.
squat like shit.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I don't have to do it. So the balloon there helps with that. From there, because there's multiple pieces. There's breathing mechanics, which is just the position of your body. It's like their squat mechanics, the physical stuff of it.
I need to go to one of these seminars. I don't know what I'm doing. I got to be
You guys
honest.
need to just have them come out and do a seminar
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I mean, you guys don't have really like a big name, but I'm sure if I asked him, he would.
If you could pull some strings for us.
Yeah, he would come out. And he's not too far away or pop over, but they're really. We've been working on this stuff. We published a study on this stuff 5 maybe or so years ago. Then we got launched into this whole world. Brian was working on it. We started working with Wim Hof in that group, and then I joined up with Laird and Gabby with XPT. So we've been doing a lot of work with the XPT front. So it's another good resource to check out.
Yeah.
It's different stuff, but Brian and XPT kind of do different things. So it's been nice to work with both of those groups, especially in a lot of these areas with cold, the movement stuff, the breath work. When we started 4 or 5 years ago, we were super crude. And I look back now and I'm like, yeah, a lot of that was wrong. And so I'd say, for sure, what we're doing right now is something's wrong. But there's a lot more here than I thought of. In fact, when Brian first brought it up to me, I'm like, this is stupid. Like, this is all dumb. There's no. And then I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God, there's actually dozens, hundreds of studies in this area. I just never really look. Judging before you look again. That's this guy. So there's here, and I think the more Brian works and other people that do it, and the more PJ Nestler and the guys at XPT get moving in that area, like we're learning more and more and more of the relationship between how you breathe at rest and, again, your ability to handle stress, your resiliency. And right now it looks like some pretty good connections between those two, which is pretty crazy.
Has there been some other weird things that have popped up over the years that you never thought you'd be like studying? I mean, there's people that are talking about, pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth and, creating a certain jawline and all these weird
We actually
and
ran
breathing.
we ran a study on that, looking at putting a mouthpiece in versus not a mouthpiece, maybe 6-7 years ago, and didn't find much. So we looked at absolute performance and a bunch of different things. But having said that, we didn't dive extremely deep in the topic. There's things there. My feeling on that, though, is you got to be careful of washout in terms of there's so many things that go into maximal performance. If you isolate one, you might see something there, but it may or may not be important when you consider everything that's going on to it. So it may, to me, it's sort of like, okay, all of us, nutrition for all of us is probably very similar at the big level. Right? This is one of your very early questions. Like, are we really that different? No. The big ticket's really there for almost all of us. Having said that, there are some small percentage of us where it's like, okay, maybe you don't handle meat very well. Okay, great. But if that is happening in 0.001% of people on this planet, well, the fact that we have 7+ billion people, that means there's going to be 100,000 people that helps. And so this is when you look around, you're like, oh my God, this particular thing is getting so much and so many people seem to be responding. Yeah, there's placebo effect. That accounts for a lot of it. But then it's also just you have a lot of people. And it's easy to see numbers if you know how to run your social media things right. So, yeah, there's a lot more to some of that stuff. And there's a lot more to like some of this reflexology stuff, which is very, very interesting. But how that washes out in terms of, yeah, okay, you could do all that stuff, but you know it's probably more effective? Like maybe caffeine, taking some smelly salt, and being really fucking jacked up. Like, I don't know if you did both those conditions, then you did your like touch my shoulder, rub my foot, and tickle my ear. Like, I think that'd just be washed out.
Yeah, so you're talking a little bit about what the Russian weightlifters have done for years, where they pull on the ears before they go lift, right? That
There's
kind of stuff.
All kinds of things
Yeah.
like that. There's a lot in that space we haven't learned.
Yeah. I think some of that stuff, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the Russian weightlifters do it, but
Yeah.
they aggressively pull on the guy's ears.
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
imagine it would just make you pissed off.
Maybe.
Might be good to get you fired up, you know?
I hate that. Did you like getting slapped before you lift?
No, I don't
hate
like
it.
Yeah, I don't need it. I don't want it.
Man, I remember a friend did that one time, and I was like, "Stop it! That's it. Now I got let me start this whole process again, because now you just distracted me and it stings, and now I'm all
Hey,
irritated."
bro, that really hurt.
Yeah, right. Like, I know the student here is about to try to choke me
Ow.
unconscious,
Say,
but don't
ow.
slap my thigh. That stings.
Yeah.
Ow. So again, it's not like there's nothing to this stuff. There is, but when you take it in isolation, I think it has a bigger effect than when you put the whole shebang. When you put the competition nerves, and you got the crowd in front of you. Like, I just think some of the stuff maybe washes out,
Right.
a bit. But man,
Yeah. And
I've
how
been
do
wrong
you,
before
yeah,
about
well,
100,000
yeah.
times. So
yeah, and how do you apply it? How do you continue to apply it? Is it too much of a pain in the ass to apply it? You know, can you,
well, this is the game we talk about with most of the athletes I work with, but it's not the earlier in my career and earlier in other coaches' careers, they get excited about what all can I give to an athlete. The more and more you get into this, you start to realize that's not the game. The game is what can we afford to not do? Like, that's it, right? If you're already training this many hours, I can't
you're
have
going to
you.
drive somebody crazy. You
Nuts.
got to do the ice bath. You got to be on the Compex machine. You got to do the sauna.
It's
you gotta
too. They get anxiety.
like, fuck.
They get huge anxiety from it,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know what?
Now I'm going to lose because I'm not doing all of what he said to do.
Yeah, or
I'm
it's just
toast.
like,
I'm done.
fuck, mentally.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to get. A lot of us have a hard time getting mentally up enough to go do one really hard workout. Now imagine you got to do that 2-3 times a day, and then you got to get mentally up to go get in the ice bath. And you got to get mentally up to go, stretch, and then you got to get mentally. Sometimes you want to just be like, whoa.
And you have a whole gym on your back. You know,
Yeah.
you have you're representing everybody that fights in that camp. You know, it's a big deal.
100%, and it's TV, and it's embarrassing because you're gonna get on Sports Center if it goes wrong enough, and it's just like, and it's your career, and in fight sports, one bad one can be it. I mean, that can be a wrap. Like, it's just hard. There's this, like, powerlifting, you have one shitty meet, who cares? Lifting, but one bad meet, well, you got the next one. Like, weightlifting or combat sports, man, that could be a wrap.
I'm sure the intensity of it too is probably, and the conversations that happen in the household are probably like, this is kind of like your last fight that you're going to do, right? And I can imagine that they keep pushing. Like, that's happened to me many times with powerlifting, which
Yeah.
powerlifting is not, the stakes are not nearly as high. At least they're not for me.
Well,
I don't care as much. but, like,
Performance-wise, they are, but safety-wise, in terms they are. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
dialed in with 800 on your back, things can go very bad.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you're done. But I imagine, it's got to be just insanely stressful.
Yeah, and it is, and so like right now that I told you that world title fight, it's July right now. That's when it's going to go down. We're building a whole camp right now. We've got effectively 4 months, and what my job is right now and is literally to sit with his strength conditioning coach and a couple other key pieces of his team members. We'll be on a whiteboard next week, and everything, all the stuff we've been talking about today, all goes on the whiteboard, and more. Everything we can possibly think of goes on the whiteboard. And then from there we go, okay, what do we need to pick from? Okay, we know what? Like, this is going to be out for this, and this is going to be out, and this is going to be out, and this is going to be out, until we can dial it back to, okay, buddy, right now, month number 1, it's going to be this type of training, and we're going to use this recovery, and that's what I got to do. Month number 2, we go to this. And yeah, I know we need to be stretching the whole time. We need to be doing this, and we need to do sauna, blah, 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 blah. Like, you cannot throw this to an athlete. They get super overwhelmed. And you also honestly start getting conflicting physiological signals. you start compromising adaptation, right? Like if you start training for too many things at once, nothing happens, and you start now you're just working and you're adding extra volume, which is not helpful at all 3 months out, 4 months out from a fight. And so people will maybe look at his program the first month, I guarantee it, and you'd be like, a world title fight, and he's doing this? He's not on supplements, he's not on this, blah, blah, blah. You're like, yeah. Like, oh, man, your coaches don't know anything. Oh, yeah, no. No, we know more than you, dumb. Because we're thinking about the entire picture, and this is a 4-month plan. And there will be a time when we'll ramp up recovery supplements. There'll be a time when we go do this and this. But right now, this is all he can dose with because it's month 1, physically and mentally. Like he came off of he's going to be coming back from some mental things from his last fight. And it's just hard to get like, okay, we're doing this again.
So it's an easier conversation to say, hey, you know what? You're only going to be doing this like really hard shit for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, or
Right.
it's like, hey, we're going to take a month to get rolling into it. Then you'll be in shape. And then we're going to roll, and it's going to be this setup. And this is going to be hard, and then we're going to back up to here. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I can do that. As opposed to going, all right, buddy, Monday, start fight camp.
16 weeks.
Let's go. Exactly.
Like, oh my
Get
God.
the extra caffeine. You're like, geez. And then, like, I don't want to do that and then have this happen. And, like, it's hard to, I mean, one thing if he just, like, had a first-round knockout in his last fight, but he didn't. And so, like, it's just real hard to
Yeah.
get right there again.
Wait.
And you can't just drop him in it, you know.
This guy's a current champ?
Not a current champ,
Okay.
technically. He technically not a current champ. So, but yeah.
So last time you were here, the gym was kind of brand new.
Yeah.
What do you think this time around? I mean, it wasn't really put together.
You have hired some fantastic decorators. I don't know if that's your job or
It is.
Yeah,
Interior design.
Actually, it's all me.
just
yeah, that's his
is that
main
what your
thing.
undergraduate degree's in?
Yes.
Interior design. The feng shui is fantastic. It still has a little bit of that homoerotic vibe, which I like.
That's what I was going
So,
for.
Yes, you nailed it.
Very erotic.
No, man, I gotta say, I'm really proud of you. Oh, actually, before I don't know what we're doing on time, but I gotta mention this before we leave because you made me think about it. I'm so proud of you. This whole thing you've built, man. And I just heard, I don't know how I missed this. I was listening to your show a month ago or something, and somehow the story came up of why you named the super training.
Oh, cool.
It made me like tear up.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's so cool, man. Like that's the stuff I live for. And
Yeah.
you're like, man, and like, we were talking kind of earlier in the show about like mentoring stuff, and I'm like, dude, what that dude did for you.
Yeah, Mel Siff. Give me a free book.
And then look what you did in return.
Yeah.
Like super training will live on well past
Yeah.
the generation, and some percentage of your idiotic fans will get so interested about super training, maybe they'll pick up his book, and now his legacy will.
Right.
We'll
No
go
one's
on.
going to read that book. It's impossible.
It
No one
is.
understands it.
But you should have it just to say that it's in your bookshelf.
Hey, Strength Aerobics is in there. You can look
Yeah.
it up.
But no, man, like the place looks fantastic, and every time I see that you're buying a jet now, you guys know he just bought a jet. Mark has a jet now. No, I'm
It's
sure
a little
it's
slower than I wanted to be.
Yeah, it
but-
looks like a truck, but no, it's just so awesome to see people that come from like actually strength people and that come from this stuff and to just move the whole thing. And I think your pro wrestling days, your taglines are just so money, man. They're just so
you need-
money.
You
As
need,
like
to have, need to have some entertainment value.
I didn't mean it like that. I mean like in terms of like make the world a better place to live.
Right.
Like what an amazing message. Like let's just move that forward, and it's that stuff that it takes that to move the actual culture to make this the norm. So
I feel like
it's-
people still don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So I'm working at it very, very hard every day.
Well, I mean the company's obviously growing, and the stuff is out here. The last time I was literally in this building, it was boxes, no floor.
Yep.
There was just stuff everywhere.
Yeah, we built
And now
a
you're-
floor.
And now you're
we had
opening.
no floor.
You're getting the next place over.
Yep.
I told you, dude. Like, when are you gonna just buy this whole building?
I know. That'll be next.
Yeah, you guys got the money. Just do it.
That'll be a lot. That'll be a lot of space.
He's over there thinking like, maybe we should give me a raise before we start buying buildings.
What's this cute little person I see on your Instagram? This little 9-month baby that you got
Oh
going on
man,
here. What's her name?
Tatiana.
It's beautiful. See,
Thanks,
I
man.
saw a picture the other day. She looked like Pebbles from the Flintstones.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a trip. She, so the wife is Russian heritage wise, and so we wanted to give her keep her a Russian name. So pretty stoked that it's Tatiana. In fact, one of the first gifts we got for her was a set of baby styrofoam dumbbells, and I think headgear and shin guards, and Kara was what got us that. So it's like 2 months old. She's got her sparring equipment. She's got her dumbbells already. And now she's talking already, and she loves she lives in my garage is a gym, so she loves being out there. And like I put her on the barbell, and she had look at that. Oh yeah, this is classic. Those are Tatiana squats.
Is she
Little more unstable back then.
she's starting to get around a little bit? 9 months.
Yeah, for sure. She
cruising
loves
around?
she stands, she picks herself up. She has like
My son used to do. We called it the perimeter walk. He would like hold onto the wall
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
shuffle.
I forget what they call that. Shuffling, I think is what it is. But she'll do the like Spider-Man, hold on the wall and shuffle around. And she loves to hold on to the dumbbell or the barbell. Look at that.
How many times have you seen her just totally wreck herself?
Not too many because
you-
she's
are
so
you-
fat that her belly like kind of gives her a center weight, so she can't really topple over so much.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's interesting to watch them fall because they like strategically kind of fall on their butt a lot of times.
Oh yeah.
And it's
No.
not that far for them to go. There's the picture I was talking about where she looked like pebbles.
Yeah, look at that. That's her like for whatever reason she adopted that sleeping position.
She normally sleeps like that.
Yeah, that's no, that's like we took a picture of the baby monitor thing. She all night, 10
Nice.
hours. Phew, like that. It's like she sleeps 10 hours, but still. No, she loves it. That's her go-to now. It's funny that the trip with kids, man, in strength training and where we come from, you're so used to these linear progressions, right? But no, she said her first word like a month ago. And then the next day she said like 4 other words. And within like a week she had like 10 other words. So I'm like, you go from 0 to like now all of a sudden you can talk. Not just like the slow, just boom, now you can talk. Dang, man.
That's
She
crazy.
goes from I had her sat down on her little playpen. I was feeding the dogs. And I turned around and she was standing up. And I was like, okay, nope, we got that skill down. So now she learned to like grab, do a pull up and stands all the way up and she can stand up and like she laughs and
Changes all the rules on how you have to watch them because like she could do all kinds of get herself in all kinds of crazy trouble now.
exactly. So now
Like,
she
"Oh,
torments
where'd she go?
she torments the dogs now, just like chases around and grabs their paws and just laughs and they're like, knock it off.
One of our
Really funny.
relatives was like 8 months pregnant and she couldn't find her son. I think her son was like 4. She was frantically looking all over the house. She runs outside and somebody left a ladder to fix something on the roof. The kid was on the roof
Oh my god.
and she had no idea how to get him down. She was like, she's like, I could climb the ladder, but I'm also like 9 months pregnant and it was a pretty tall ladder. So she did eventually get up there and get her down, get her son down. But she was like, oh, this is like iffy, you know?
You cannot tell me those stories. My heart can't handle this.
Oh,
like,
man.
tell me this when I got a 15-year-old, buddy. Not
Oh
now.
man, yeah, I was the worst when my kids were young. I
Do you,
was always terrified they were gonna like wipe out somewhere, you know.
You miss those days at all?
A little bit, yeah. Like when I see a baby, you know, like
Yeah.
I love babies. I always have since I was young. We have a lot of people in my family, and so somebody was always cranking out a baby. So I always had a baby in my hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love kids a lot. Like when I was young, I wanted to have a lot of kids, but once I had one, I was like, fuck that. I don't think we can have more. I don't think we can have more than like 2 or 3 of these things. You know.
So did Andy have to convince you to have the next one, or were you both kind of like, okay, we'll
No,
do one
we were
more, but
both-
that's
yeah.
it?
No, well, we thought it was a good idea to have more than one, just so it's got
Yeah.
got a buddy, you know.
Well, that's what like Natasha and I were anti-kids for forever, and then I was like, okay, I'm doing 0 or 2.
Yeah.
There's no other negotiable options here. It's kind of nice to have a sibling. You have like this inherent, not always, but oftentimes like a guaranteed best friend. Like, and it's really cool, especially I think if you have them the same gender. Like
My
you're gonna-
kids definitely like they team up against us, you know.
Yeah. It's cool, and later in life, you know, like they're always gonna have, like you guys eventually will be old and senile, and they're not gonna want to hang out with mom anymore, but they're gonna be still really, really close friends most likely. So,
Right.
just like you and your brother, like you
Exactly.
always have so much in common that it's always there, and you always, send them a message on this or show them this, and you're always gonna have that thing of like you're interested in many, many similar things.
Yeah, you got a built-in buddy.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea. It's fun.
What do you got coming up? I'm sure there's a lot, but
Oh my gosh! So that world title fight is going to be a major focus for the summer, and we actually are starting. This is going to be really cool. We're finishing up Kara Wednesday, right? So 3 days now, we'll officially be done with that study. Anyway, data collection, and we are literally starting. We're about to start an intermittent fasting study. So this is really going to be cool. We're looking at probably more specifically time-restricted feeding. So 16/8. That you're all familiar with, compared to your traditional 4, so meals a day, equated for total calories and equated for protein. And for basically equated for carbohydrate and fat intake as well. But the thing is, we're using well-trained people, and the primary outcomes are going to be hypertrophy. So I know that fat loss is identical between these two things and all the health and obesity things, but no one looks at performance with all this stuff. So that's what we're looking at, is we're going to look at, does this compromise, help, or aid, or is it the same in terms of your ability to grow muscle mass? We're also looking at how, if any of the microbiome changes in the gut with these two different feeding styles. We're looking at taking biopsies. We're looking at all these cellular mechanisms behind that. We're looking at multiple muscle groups. So it's an extremely comprehensive study. And so that is actually starting. And we're basically ready to go right now.
You said you're mainly accounting for calories and protein?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the deal with the carbs and stuff like that?
So those would be pretty much the same
between
the two groups. So the only real difference will be the time-restricted feeding group will, eat within their 8-hour window. The other group will eat within more like a 12-hour window.
Right.
So we want to isolate that particular point. Everything else is going to be the exact same. And does that really influence? Does it help? Does it hurt? Does it not matter at all? And to me, that's going to be a very important question, because if you look at the time-restricted feeding literature, again, it's clear that you can lose fat that way, but you don't have to. It's identical. Once you equate for calories and protein, fat loss is identical between time-restricted feeding, 16-8.
What do you mean equate for protein? Like, why are you saying equate? Like, I've heard people say equate for calories, but not protein. Why are you saying protein?
So for a whole host of factors, but that seems to be the thing that drives satiety the most. It drives muscle the most. So you're going to have, as long as you maintain amino acid intake, you're going to be able to maintain most of your muscle mass. If you don't, that will go quickly. So those are some of the reasons. You have to equate in almost all of these studies. If, for example, we didn't equate for that, and say the time-restricted feeding group had a lot less protein, well, then at the end of the study, I would almost guarantee you they have less muscle mass. And I wouldn't know if it was because they just had less protein or if it's because of the time-restricted feeding. So I don't want that to be in the equation. I want to simply know, is adjusting your time of eating going to help, hurt, or does it really not matter? And I don't have a dog in the fight. It doesn't matter, which is nice, because I don't have a company that's behind me. I don't have this isn't my whole research lab line where I am here to show that time-restricted feeding is the bomb or not. And so however it comes out to me, it's going to be tremendous answers, right? I'm going to be able to say, hey, look, do 16-8 or not, and you'll be just fine. You can grow equally. Or, hey, it might be fine if you're trying to lose fat or for health, longevity, but don't do this if you're trying to gain muscle.
What do you think?
I don't know.
What do you think it might turn out to be?
Well, the obvious hypothesis is that the time-restricted feeding will compromise some of the muscle gain. Not because I'm against it or anything like that. We do fasting stuff all the time. But simply that's what the literature suggests right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at the molecular mechanisms behind that, that's what they would indicate. Now, mechanisms don't necessarily always predict whole muscle outcome, but that's literally why we do this study, is to say, okay, do they actually match up? And so they give us clues. So based on the available clues right now, that's what we would think would happen. But since no one's done it, we don't know. And that's why we're going to actually do it.
It's going to be fun.
No, it's going to be good. I think the microbiome stuff, we're doing that with my buddy Jimmy Bagley at San Francisco. It's going to be really interesting to see if he's actually shown, this has been really cool. He has published his first study now looking at how aerobic exercise changes the microbiome in the gut. And no one's looked at strength training. And I would be betting my career strength training will also change the microbiome there. And so we'll be the first study to look at that as well. So that'll be really, really cool. And we'll have a whole bunch of other things.
It just made my mind explode a little bit.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I think this is, this is obviously, if you look at all of physiology science, the gut is clearly the thing moving the needle right now over the whole scope. And I think it's about time that it moves into our area as well. So
you think from a perspective of people just being just flat out too fat, people having trouble controlling.
You just triggered me. I'm triggered now.
Controlling their appetite, right?
Yeah.
Do you think something like fasting, do you think there's some simple answers, like telling people maybe not to eat carbs or telling people to eat less carbs, telling people, hey man, maybe you should try some fasting, do you think there might be some simple things that people can try, even just adding more protein? Like if you just had 8 grams of protein per pound of body weight,
I would typically,
maybe that would restrict your other habits.
My response to that, I think it's easier to encourage people to add than it is to tell people to stop doing. So I would rather your latter approach. Hey, let's focus on making sure you have protein at every meal. And let's make sure like you eat whole food and you have some vegetables and things like this. Whenever you start restricting, you run into all kinds of problems.
So if I add so much to your plate, there's not a whole lot of room for a lot of error, right?
You've effectively reduced the likelihood they're going to eat other stuff because they're going to there. And just from a perspective of the way I always say is like, I'm not interested in a game of a little bit less worse. Like, don't ask me, well, which one's better, the Triscuit or the fat-free Triscuit? You're eating a fucking Triscuit. Like, I'm not going to answer that question. I do not answer that question. The only question I will answer is, which one of these two is better for me? So that's how I want to shift the entire conversation. And I want you to pick the one that's most good, not the least bad. And almost always they already know the answer to that, right? So if the option is an apple or a Triscuit, you know the answer here. So that it really makes nutrition very, very simple. We have to be cognizant, I think, of people with or that are susceptible to eating disorders or eating disorder-like issues. Now, I don't deal with that at all. Not my area. I would never dabble in that. But some people, restriction gets a very negative feedback and negative spin. We have seen clearly binge dieting for the average person not only doesn't work, but often exacerbates the problem. And so I think you have to be careful with those restriction messages. So for those reasons, I think it's tough to walk around and say, hey, you should go try some fasting, because that has such a negative connotation in most people's mind. So the way that I approach it is this. I'll just keep saying my dad, right? Which is the average person who doesn't give a shit about this space, isn't into it. They just want, I typically don't bring fasting up. When you move past that and you're like kind of a nerd in this space, then I totally flip gears and go, no. If you can't fast, you're weak. That's a problem. We need to be able to have a relationship with food that it doesn't control us. So I need to be able to go 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it happens to be. I need to be able to say, no, you're only eating this, or you're not going to eat this.
That sounds totally fair. So if you're in this game, then it's fair to be called a bitch.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't lift that weight, you're a fucking bitch.
Yes.
Period.
Right. Agree. But that's not going to work for the.
Yeah.
I think it actually does a worse approach. So I fast. I will challenge my students to fast. One of the experiments that my students in my sports nutrition class has to do is in the semester, they have to do 60 days of a major nutritional change. I've had some do carnivore recently. Some of them will do fasting. They'll do 24-hour fast twice a week for 2 months. They'll do all kinds of other stuff. They have to do something that hurts. And that's the thing, because these people are on that next level. They're not like, they don't have a negative mental, most of them, state attached to nutrition. For them, it is, no, I want you to suffer. We need to understand what food does and doesn't do for us, because I know this is not going to turn into pity. This is not going to turn into issues with your life self-esteem, which is a real problem for a lot of people, right? They just don't have that relationship with food. So I think we can, but we have to be responsible and think about who we're messaging and who we're talking to. So
most of your average people that maybe don't have a fight in the game, they want to just kind of skim close to a little bit of suffering and have it be a little bit challenging, but not.
Well, I think the message needs to be
Not too
overly
hard.
positive for them. It's like,
Right.
hey, you want to feel better? Yeah. Well, did you notice how when you started eating this real food, your energy was more stable? Did you notice how? Yeah, great. And it's all positive.
And the more you gravitate towards that, the better you're going to feel. So you should continue down that path.
Yeah, let's make you feel good. Yeah, exactly. I want you to feel better. I want you to do that. Where I think we can use the tough love negative messaging is that more middle ground. Right? It's like, no, like you can't handle carbohydrate, like you can handle fat. And we can get into this. Like you're weak, you're soft. Like we need to get there. And that typically, I think, works. Or just challenging, right? Not necessarily you're weak or soft, but let's just challenge you. Like let me challenge to see what you can do. So I wouldn't hesitate to have any of my athletes do a fast if I needed for it, because like for them, nutrition is just another piece of what they need to do to train. Right? It's not like they're not as challenged with those.
Something you said earlier in the podcast, I think, is probably the best thing that I've ever heard on this podcast, besides everything I've ever said. It says, challenge every function of the human body at least a little bit. It's something that you said earlier, and I think that's a fucking great message. Anybody that's in this fitness game, go for a walk every once in a while, maybe sprint. Do some explosive lifting. Do some slow and controlled lifting, mix things up a little bit.
If you can't stand on one foot without your arch collapsing or getting a cramp on your foot, all right, if you can't...
Dude, why are you calling me out?
Right, like, again, think about what the body should be able to do, and you should be able to do at least a little bit of it every once in a while.
It's pretty damn complicated. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We can talk to you for hours on end as we have in the past. I think, the last time you were here, I think we talked for like 6 hours or something. We broke some sort of world record.
Yeah, it was absolutely world record. I checked with Guinness. It's still, you got to file the paperwork. That's why.
Where can people find you?
You can, the socials, Dr. Andy Galpin, Dr. Andy Galpin. That's pretty easy to find. And one piece I'll throw out at you. My mission, my goal is, I care little for the university system in terms of, I wish some of this information that I have is available when I was a kid. Part of me wishes, part of me doesn't. But I think it's, I almost said a bad word there. I think it's very silly and unnecessary that we put some of this information behind, oh, you got to get into the school and you got to take 2 years of prereqs and you got blah, 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 blah. And you're like, and then you got to get in your actual sports nutrition class, and then you have to wait till the last, actually 3 weeks when we actually talk about how much protein to eat to gain muscle. Like, why can't we just go to the end? And so what I've effectively done is taken all of my goal is, and I'm not there yet, my university education, my lectures, my class, my coursework, my nutrition, my program design, my physiology, my strength conditioning stuff, and put those all up on YouTube. And that's all free. It's 100%. There's no newsletter even to sign up. There's no upsell. I don't even have anything to sell. So I want to put that up there, and I'm working towards it. So if you had an undergraduate degree or don't have one on the field, and you basically want to get that whole free education, that's up there on YouTube. And if you were in the field, I promise I teach these areas a little bit different.
Maybe we can maybe we can encourage Lane Norton to subscribe so he can learn something.
Oh my God. You know what? Actually, every single video of his I see, he just steals my stuff. Literally, I make a video, it goes out, a week later, he makes exact same video.
Oh.
Exact same one. It's true. No, that's true, but still. No, his stuff is really good up there too. So the way that I am able to operate all this is, that's attached to, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Patreon.
Yeah.
So it's just up there. If you contribute to that, that's fantastic. If not, I don't really care. Those things will be free till the day I can't make them anymore. So that's all up there.
Awesome. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later.